Chapter 87. The giant clam's shell was very difficult to pry open. Without tools, the fishermen were helpless. List didn't force it. In any case, it was fine as long as the black pearl couldn't run away. After the large cuttlefish was dismembered and the rotten corpse was thrown into the sea, List ordered people to carry the giant clam back to the castle and slowly study it. The giant clam had a strange shape. Along the way, it attracted the attention of many townspeople. When they arrived at the castle, all the servants also ran out to watch. No one had ever seen such a strange thing. "Teacher Marcus, how do you think we should open it?" Marcus pondered for a moment and said, "It is very strong. The two pieces of shell are firmly fixed, but its shell is irregular. There are many gaps, and we can use a stick to pry it open. Ordinary wooden sticks won't do. It will be best to use a thick iron stick. However, there shouldn't be such an iron stick." Iron tools were very precious. No one would use iron or to forge a thick iron stick specially used to pry open the giant clam's shell. "Perhaps we can use fire," Carter suggested. "The shell is too thick. It would be difficult for fire to harm it." List rejected it. There were still black pearls inside. If it were to be cooked, use hooks. 2 hooks, each hook a piece of shell. Then use the horses to pull the shell open. Marcus finally thought of a stupid method. However, the result was good. When the 2 horses each pulled a rope and almost broke the rope, the giant clam shell was finally pulled open. The giant clam was like a blooming flower. It didn't open too much, but the bands supporting the shell could already be found, which were the adductor muscles. Marcus clenched his 2-handed sword. His cheek gushed out and directly cut off one of the bands. Clatter! The horse that pulled the giant clam shell with all its might directly split it into 2 halves, and it could no longer be closed. List's gaze was already fixed on the group of protrusions on the giant clam's inner wall. The protrusions were round, and hidden inside were the pearls. Cut it open carefully. There are pearls inside. Don't scratch the pearls. "Yes, sir." Marcus used the knife personally and carefully cut open the protruding membrane. When the largest protruding membrane was cut open, a shiny black pearl was revealed. It was the size of a wash basin. "There are more on the side. Cut them all open and take them out." List was very excited. He hadn't figured out what these black pearls could do, but it was still incredible to find such a large black pearl. If this was placed in his hometown, it would definitely fetch a sky-high price. When Marcus finished cutting, he took out a total of 16 black pearls of different sizes. The biggest one was the size of a wash basin. Next were 2 basketball-sized pearls, followed by 3 bowl-sized pearls, followed by a large pile of apples, oranges, and ping-pong balls. After cleaning it, List held the largest black pearl in his hands and suddenly felt that there seemed to be traces of magic power flowing on the pearl. He quickly cast magic eyes and then saw a whirlpool-like deep magic power inside the black pearl. The color was light blue, which was the color of water magic. It actually has magic power? He had previously used magic eyes to observe the giant clam and didn't find the slightest trace of magic power. Who would have thought that the black pearls actually had magic power? "Sir, these black pearls seem to have magic power?" Marcus also found the abnormality, but he didn't have magic eyes and didn't dare to make a judgment. "It does indeed have magic power." List swayed the black pearls, thinking of the night novels he had read. One of the night novels seemed to have recorded that the song of the siren could calm the storm of the sea. There was a great knight who captured the siren and made it into a piece of magic equipment. This piece of equipment could allow the ship to sail steadily even in the midst of storm. No one knew what the siren was. Some people swore that they had heard the song of the siren. Costo had just said that he had heard the song of the siren, but there was no record of what the siren was. Most people thought that the siren was just a story made up by sailors. This story had nothing to do with the black pearls. What made List think of it was the equipment made by the siren to protect the ship against the storm. Can these black pearls also be made into magic equipment to resist the storm? After all, it is a magic item with a water attribute, and the magic power is also very rich, almost comparable to the gems produced by dragons. I don't know if it would work to suppress the storm at sea, but it should be possible to make magic equipment. Without a mage, it was impossible to study the black pearls. Liszt felt that they could also be used for other purposes, for example, as an air conditioner. Teacher Marcus, Mr. Carter, everyone, do you feel that the air is much cooler? Marcus carefully felt it. I don't feel cool, but the moisture in the air seems to have increased. It should be that the black pearls condensed the surrounding water vapor. In any case, they're good things. If you want to sell them, how many gold coins do you think they can be sold for? I have seen fist-sized white pearls. I heard from others that they are worth at least 5 gold coins. I guess that black pearls of the same size should be sold for 10 gold coins. As for the largest black pearl, sir, I can't estimate its value. It is a brand new pearl. It has a very rich magic power, definitely more valuable than white pearls, but the castle is not short of money for the time being. Its price should be considered again. Liszt was not very satisfied with Marcus' valuation. He felt that even if the black pearl was twice the price of white pearls, it was still underestimated. Its value was probably far greater than imagined. So he said to Carter, Mr. Carter, move them to my study. He kept a ping-pong ball-sized black pearl in his hand, carefully playing with it. Yes, master. After a moment, Carter came back and asked, Master, what about the giant clam? Can its meat be eaten? I think it can. Well, let Dosen have a taste first. In case it is poisonous, just throw it away. What about the 2 shells? Clean the inside of the shell. I want to see if it has turned into jade. Jade giant clams, in List's hometown, were precious jewels, one of the 7 treasures of Buddhism. In the West, giant clams, pearls, corals, and amber stood side by side, known as the 4 great organic jewels. Jade giant clams were the whitest substance in the world. It was formed by the inside of the giant clam that had turned into jade. Such a big giant clam, there should be a part of it that has turned into jade. However, Liszt soon realized that he was wrong. Although the giant clam was huge, there was no sign of the inside of it turning into jade. At this time, he remembered that it was impossible for a living giant clam to turn into jade. It took time for it to turn into jade. Just like the gestation of jade, it needed thousands of years of precipitation and carving before it could be produced. Jade giant clams were dead giant clams buried in the sand, and after thousands of years, they gradually turned into jade. Without jade, it cannot be made into jewels. Liszt had a wild idea. Mr. Carter, what do you think would happen if it was made into a bed? Chapter 88. The giant clam shell was very large, more than 2 meters long and nearly 2 meters wide. Liszt's height had been growing, and he was now almost 185 meters tall, so he could still sleep in the giant clam's shell. Of course, this proposal was just a casual remark. The giant clam shell was too strange, with its large wavy shape. It was not suitable to be made into a bed. He had people place the giant clam shell at the castle's gate, using it as a huge sculpture. It had to be said that the giant clam shell, with its internal organs removed and cleaned, looked very beautiful. After dealing with the giant clam's matter, Liszt returned to the study and began to study the black pearls. Carter had moved the black pearls to the study, but now, except for the small black pearl in Liszt's hand, no other black pearls could be seen, because they had been stuffed into the space gem on his chest by Liszt. He chose to keep valuable items close to his body. So when Carter brought a glass of juice, he said in surprise, Master, I clearly put the black pearls on this shelf. How come they're gone? I hid them. Don't be surprised. Very well. Carter didn't ask carefully where Liszt hid the black pearls. As a steward, he didn't need to know. All he needed to do was to serve the master and manage the castle's daily affairs. Drinking the juice. After half a day of fumbling, Liszt gradually had a basic understanding of the black pearls. It is very rich in magic, not much worse than the gems produced by dragons. But compared to the continuous supply of magic from gems, the black pearl's magic seems to need to be replenished. I don't have water magic, so I can't replenish it. The ping-pong ball-sized black pearl in his hand was constantly emitting magic fluctuations. This kind of fluctuation was completely different from the dragon gem. He used words that he could understand to distinguish the two. The dragon gem is more like a stable magnetic field formed by magic. It won't dissipate. The black pearl is more like a radioactive object, constantly emitting magic. After a long time, you can feel the loss of magic. So, in essence, the black pearl is a lot lower than the dragon gem. A dragon gem could easily be sold for 700 to 800 gold coins. Just like what Marcus said, a black pearl could probably be sold for around 10 gold coins. However, who knows what kind of sky-high price a basin-sized black pearl can fetch? I believe that those great nobles who are crazy about treasures and collecting antiques will be willing to buy them with dragon coins. A dragon coin was worth 10,000 gold coins. It was very difficult for great nobles who weren't especially rich to use dragon coins. Thinking so, he was unperturbed. I always feel that the reward for the smoke mission this time is the most substantial. The reward content isn't too generous, but it's no different from giving money for free. It's real. Up until now, he had completed a total of 18 quests. He had not figured out the pattern of the quests, nor had he grasped the pattern of the rewards. However, most of the mission rewards were very valuable. If one had to measure them, the World of Warcraft rewards like Docin and Blessed Curls were worth around 100 gold coins. The productivity rewards like Sprite Worms were worth around 1 or 2,000 gold coins. Sprite Worms were indeed magical and rare, but they only had a lifespan of 10 years, which was a huge constraint. Things like the Black Tulip, Flame Mushroom, and Dragon Stallion were worth an acceptable price of 1 dragon coin. Chi's secret skills like Magic Eyes were worth 3,000 gold coins. Things like Corn Grass, Smoke Grass, Super Small Saltpeter Mine, and 50 People, although their value was a bit hard to calculate, they were still very valuable. As for the information about the invisible dragon, that was another matter. The most valuable thing was the invisible dragon gem, a gem with its own space, which was a priceless treasure. However, these rewards would either require a long period of development before they could fully display their value, or they wouldn't be able to display their value due to various factors, or they would simply get into trouble because of their wealth. For example, the space gem wouldn't be exposed at all, as it would attract disaster. However, the current black pearls were different. Their value was very high. The 16 black pearls of various sizes could be sold for at least 10,000 gold coins. The key was that they could be sold separately. After all, these things were not a set, they were all individual items. Should I sell them, or sell them, or sell them? List pondered for a moment and decided to take out a bowl-sized black pearl to test the market. Yesterday, Carter told him that August 19th was Levis's birthday and asked what gift he wanted. When the time came, he would go to Tulip Castle to participate in the other party's birthday party. As a gift, just some high-grade seafood will do. I can also ask him if he has any plans to buy black pearls. The Tulip family has water-attributed chi, so they should have a need for black pearls. I can ask a wizard to help me forge a magic equipment. When the time comes, he can also answer my doubts about how black pearls can be used. No one was better at studying magic items than wizards. It was hard to say whether there were wizards on the Coral Island, but the Tulip family could definitely contact a wizard. If the price was right, List was ready to sell a few black pearls first, raise a sum of gold coins, and then give them to Levis to continue to help him buy serfs. He also had to buy some pig iron and wrought iron to be handed over to the blacksmith shop to forge farm tools. He was very dissatisfied with the inefficiency of the town's serfs in farming. There was no way to get cattle for the time being, and the study of plows would take time. Therefore, he could only forge more shovels and hoes so that all serfs could plow the fields more efficiently. Thus, some serfs would be liberated from the farmland and put into other professions. If I sell them for a high price, I can buy some calves, foals, lambs, and concentrate fodder for pregnant horses. By the way, I can repair the castle. It is best to build a firebed. It is going to be winter soon. In this era of no heating, I can only enjoy it by burning a firebed. Being farsighted was probably how List was described. Not long after the beginning of summer, he was already thinking about winter's life. The North Valley City's caravan arrived at the flower town before 8 o'clock in the morning. After more than 8 months, the caravan entered the flower town again. In the past, The caravan would follow the tax night and come once a season, except for winter. In other words, 3 times a year. Every time the caravan came, the team would be as lively as a New Year's Day. This time was no exception. The mighty caravan quickly attracted all the residents of the town. Basically, they put down their work and came to watch. List, who had finished his morning exercise and no longer touched the bow and arrow, returned to the castle to take a bath. Standing in front of the window, he could see the bustling crowd of the town. In particular, the clowns who had set up the stage and began to perform burlesque attracted the attention of the vast majority of the town's residents. The laughter and cheers could even be heard in the castle. "Maggie, go and call Mr. Carter," he said to the maid Maggie, who was cleaning. "Yes, master." Soon, Carter rushed over. "Master, you were looking for me? The town is very lively today. Tell everyone in the castle that if they want to rest today, they can go directly to the castle to rest. Go to the town to see the burlesque or buy some snacks and relax. You are really a generous aristocrat. I will tell the servants the truth, including you, Mr. Carter." Chapter 89. Mrs. Abby, little Lily, and I are going to the town to see the burlesque. Would you like to go with us? Irene moved the large piece of giant clam meat from the basket outside the castle to dry. Dosen had eaten a large piece of giant clam meat yesterday. Not only was he fine, he was also full of vigor. Therefore, giant clam meat could be eaten. Oh heavens, why is the master so generous to let you have a holiday? Mrs. Abby busily arranged the various seasonings on the stove. If you like being a maid, then you should obediently stay in the kitchen. There are a lot of things to do every day. Mr. Carter said that the master only needs a fried steak for lunch, while we servants can eat beans and bread. We don't need to do much work. Little Lily was also moving the giant clam meat. A giant clam weighed more than 500 gene. After removing the 300 gene shell, there was still more than 200 gene of meat. Mr. Carter is the same as the master, always indulging you young servants who don't work hard. This is not the benevolence of a qualified butler. When I was young, I was busy all day in the kitchen, never idle for even a moment. That is the working attitude a kitchen maid should have. Cough, cough. Carter's cough came from the door. At some point, he had already arrived. Although I can understand Mrs. Abby's serious attitude towards work, you shouldn't always be so tense. Go stroll around the town with the young people. It's rare for a caravan to come. Sorry, Mr. Carter, I didn't mean to offend you. Mrs. Abby felt a little embarrassed. She had just been caught speaking ill of him behind his back. It doesn't matter. In fact, you said I'm benevolent, so I take it as a compliment. Go with Irene and little Lily to see the town's burlesque. Those clowns will make me laugh when I think of them. That won't do. I have to make lunch for the master. Then hurry back before 11 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock now. We can still stroll around for 2 hours. Not waiting for Mrs. Abby to refuse, Carter interrupted her. Just consider it a task I gave you and have fun for 2 hours. Mr. Carter, you are good. Irene happily pulled Abby's arm. Let's go, Mrs. Abby. I can't wait to see the clown. Little Lily pulled Abby's other arm. Yes, let's go. Mrs. Abby had no choice but to half push them out. I don't want to go shopping, but I'd better keep an eye on you two in case you go crazy and forget to come back to work. Also, wait a minute, I'm going to change my clothes. I can't go out dressed like this. It would lose the castle's dignity. Carter smiled as he looked at the 2 children and the big one making a ruckus. Compared to working in the Count's other castle, the work in this small town's castle was a bit busier, but life was more lively. The youthful vigor of youth made him feel an inexplicable motivation in his body, as if he was younger than last year. He heard footsteps. He turned around and saw that it was Mrs. Morrison. Maggie and the others have already gone shopping in town. Yes, Tom and Thomas went with them. Mr. Carter, are you not going with them? Mrs. Abby, Irene, and little Lily are changing their clothes. They're going to the town to see a burlesque. I think you should go with them. As for the castle, I will stay here to serve the master. You know, even Thomas has left. If the master wants to drink water, there will always be a manservant to serve him. Then I will also stay here. If there is anything, you can call me. Are you sure you don't want to join the fun? I'm already old. I can't wait to avoid the fun. How could I want to join in? Don't say that, Mrs. Morrison. I feel that the more I live, the younger I am. Carter straightened his chest, making himself look more spirited. Yes, young Carter. Annie, have you sold more than half of the tomatoes? John Shoulderpole walked to his stall. The stall was located on the southwest side of the town, where a large flat area had been cleared. Caravans that came to the town were arranged to do business here. There were also a few wooden toilets outside. The patrol team and the town clerk shouted over and over again, "Sir Lord has decreed that no one is allowed to urinate or defecate anywhere. Violators will be fined and whipped. If you want to go to the toilet, follow the arrow and go to the toilet outside. The one with the circle below and the arrow pointing up, male sign, is the men's toilet sign. The one with the circle above and the cross below, female sign, is the women's toilet sign." Don't get it wrong. John was already used to this instruction. It had been a long time since he had defecated on the street. His family had prepared a manure bucket and stored the excrement and urine. After the manure was removed, it would be directly used to compost the tomato fields. This was a farming magic taught by the Sir Lord. The farmers who used this magic to fertilize the fields could have a harvest of 20 to 30% more than before. Previously, the town's officials organized the purchase of manure, but now they could no longer be collected. Every household kept the manure and planted it in their own fields. After the harvest, the kind and generous Sir Lord only collected taxes in proportion, unlike the previous tax knight, who could not wait to collect all of the serf's harvest. Since the arrival of the Sir Lord, John felt that not only himself, but also the surrounding neighbors had undergone earth-shaking changes. Of course, he was the luckiest one, because the Sir Lord rewarded him with a nalda, because the tomatoes he had taken care of had bred a tomato worm. "John, aren't you going to work with the house-building team today?" Annie asked her husband curiously. There was not much farm work now. Her husband was working with the house-building team for a copper a day. The house-building team is on holiday. No one wants to work today, so they all came here to the commercial district. John pointed to a place not far away. "Look, that's Wenger. He's also shopping with his son." "Well, then let's go watch the skits. I've sold all the tomatoes, so I want to go watch the skits. I haven't seen one for a long time." John did not leave. Instead, he said, "By the way, Annie, when I came over there, I saw someone selling kittens. I want to buy one. You know, now that we have food in our house, the number of rats has begun to increase. These dirty thieves, they always steal our food." "Really? Is there anyone selling kittens? Then wait here for me. After I sell all the tomatoes, we'll go buy kittens together. We must choose a kitten that can catch rats the best." After hesitating for a moment, John added, "Actually, I also want to buy a foal. I want little Jack to learn how to ride from an early age, so that he can become a retainer knight of Sir Lord earlier." "Oh my God, John, do you know how much a foal costs?" 50 silver coins, but Annie, that is a foal." John explained hopefully, "If we miss this opportunity, I don't know when we will get a horse again. I want to grow tomatoes for Sir Lord for a lifetime, but little Jack doesn't like it. He wants to become a retainer knight." "But John, you need to understand, we can afford 50 silver coins, but foals need to eat a lot every day. A horse needs to eat at least several people's food. Can we afford it?" "I can," John said with a firm look in his eyes. "The tomato field at home is the best. It can always bring us a stable income. I can also work. I asked the house-building team's manager. He is Sir Isaiah's assistant. He told me that there will be more and more work in the town in the future. Sir Lord is ambitious and wants to make the town look new. As long as I can continue to work, we can afford to raise foals." "Are you serious, John?" "Of course, believe me, Annie." Annie looked at her husband's firm eyes and finally couldn't bear to refuse. "All right, but you have to promise me that we won't be dragged down by foals, right?" Chapter 90. Liszt didn't want to disturb the lively atmosphere of the town, but in the end, he couldn't hold back and went to the commercial district to watch a farce. It was a clown throwing balls, blowing fire, or somersaulting on the stage. In his opinion, this was nothing new, but the townspeople were cheerfully clapping their hands. It made Liszt want to go up and show them the three immortals' return to cave trick, so that these people from the other world could feel the charm of China's ancient culture and tradition. Of course, he could only think about it. Aristocrats could not do anything that would be beneath their status. Besides, in a world where wizards existed, magic didn't seem to be a magical performance. After watching the show, he left the commercial district and went to the town's administrative office, lest the townspeople feel uncomfortable. In front of the Lord, they couldn't relax and didn't even dare to speak loudly. Although he had left, he was still paying attention to the caravan. He was listening to Isaiah's report on the prices of the goods brought by the caravan, especially those related to production and daily necessities. A foal costs at least 50 silver coins. This price is too high, he asked with a frown. One had to know that when he and Levis traded slaves, a serf was only worth 20 silver coins. It is indeed very expensive, Sir Baron. The Coral Island is far from the continent and has no suitable grazing area. The breeding of horses has always been limited, so the price of horses has always been high. Even the horses of the Blue Dragon Island are so expensive. On the continent, a foal might only cost a few silver coins. The archipelago countries were all islands, so they were naturally not suitable for grazing and raising horses. Liszt understood this, but he didn't want to accept it for a while. He gave old Grandet 3 gold coins, thinking that he could buy a lot of goods. But now it seemed that he could spend it all on 6 foals. How many livestock cubs did the caravan bring? He asked, feeling a little disappointed. He originally wanted to eat all the livestock cubs brought by the caravan, but now it seemed that it was an extravagant hope. Apart from him, perhaps ordinary residents didn't have the financial resources to buy them. 5 foals, 2 calves, 3 lambs, 8 piglets, 6 puppies, 5 kittens, and 10 rabbits. I gave old Grandet 3 gold coins, but it doesn't seem to help. It's not enough to buy a few livestock. At this moment, he desperately wanted to sell the black pearls and exchange them for money to buy livestock. Meat was the most nutritious food. He hoped to eat meat every day, seafood aside. If the territory didn't rear livestock, how could he, as the Lord, find meat every day? 3 gold coins can't buy a lot of livestock, but can buy a lot of other goods. The caravan has brought a lot of local specialties. But I told old Grandet to give priority to the horses. 5 foals cost 2 gold coins and 50 silver coins. The castle's funds have all been used up. Liszt remembered that he still had 2 gold coins. Perhaps he should take them out too. He would spend them today and save a few livestock. Isaiah smiled and said, Lord Baron, I looked at the transaction records. Old Grandet only bought 2 foals. The other 3 were bought by someone else. Who? John Shoulderpole bought one. You must still remember it. It turned out to be the farmer who grew tomatoes. I rewarded him with a gold coin. Obviously, he can afford it. What about the other 2? The Blair family bought one. Marcus also bought one. Gort lent him the money. Liszt's mood turned from gloomy to sunny. He bought all the horses, although they weren't owned by the castle. But as long as they stayed in the flower town, he could conscript them at will. But soon, he laughed in spite of himself. He felt that his vision was too shallow. He only focused on the livestock brought by the caravan. After he sold the black pearls for money, he could go to other cities to purchase livestock. This was his original plan. As long as he had gold coins, he would be able to buy what he wanted. Isaiah, what do you think the caravan's turnover will be today? I guess it will be 6 gold coins. With a turnover of 6 gold coins, I believe that many of the caravan's peddlers are already preparing for their next visit. Of course, peddlers are like flies. As long as there is money to be made, there will always be their shadow. Isaiah spoke with natural contempt. This was the unparalleled sense of superiority of the aristocratic class over the commoners. At the same time, it was accompanied by the desire to attack the rising momentum of the commoners. The aristocracy would not allow any class to shake its dominance. Sometimes, merchants would make the aristocracy feel that they were being provoked. Some of them even had more wealth than the aristocracy. Money could move the gods. There were many cases of aristocrats who were on the verge of bankruptcy marrying their daughters to merchants, or marrying a merchant's daughter to become an aristocratic madam. Liszt smiled. His idea of the merchant class was the same as that of the aristocracy, to both support and attack them. Back to the castle. It was lunchtime. Although he had instructed the kitchen to only order a steak, there was no need for it to be too sumptuous. But when it came time to eat, it was still the same as usual. There was meat, vegetables, shiitake mushrooms, seafood, milk, and white bread. Mrs. Abby didn't go shopping? Master, Mrs. Abby went out, but half an hour later, she returned to the kitchen. Maybe she's not used to the lively scene in the town, or maybe she can't let go of the kitchen work. She's too dedicated, always busy. You should tell her that I don't consider raising her salary for the time being. So, she doesn't have to keep herself busy. She has to have her own life. Although he had adapted to the aristocratic identity, he still liked it. Liszt still retained the goodness of modern people. He hoped that even servants could have their own lives, rather than dedicating themselves to the Lord. Life should not only be work, 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 but also have one's own joys and sorrows, laughter, and a family. Carter served Liszt. For the cook, the kitchen is life. For the servants, the castle is life. Master, you don't have to think about us all the time. The sun climbs from east to west every day, and the servants are busy from morning to night every day. Life is about everyone doing their part. These words were very philosophical. Liszt was speechless. His ideas were still estranged from this era. He had the pursuit of freedom in his bones, but the concept of class had been branded in the depths of the hearts of everyone in the other world. If a servant didn't work, could he still be called a servant? If an aristocrat didn't enjoy life, could he still be called an aristocrat? Therefore, he had no intention of refuting or correcting Carter's words. On the contrary, his conscience might be a little uncomfortable, but he was quite happy in his heart. If everyone thought like this, the aristocratic master's life would be more stable and comfortable. They were all good people. Liszt had just finished his lunch and was ready to tease Dosen and blessed Curls before taking a nap. Chapter 91. The metal bottle was shaped a bit like a bottle used to pack high-end liquor. It was very unique. Its color was golden yellow, close to the color of gold coins, but a bit more brown. There were complex engraved patterns on it, and some patterns were wrapped in them. They looked like abstract pictures of the sun and trees, as well as bows and arrows, and some kind of zither, as well as a bear and a flying eagle. Overall, this metal bottle was like a precious art that aristocrats like to collect the most. Clang, clang, clang. He tapped the metal bottle with his finger, making a strange sound. It was not a sound that metal should make. It was a bit similar to the sound of plastic. However, it was obvious that this brownish-yellow bottle was definitely a metal product. It had the tactile feel of metal. Teacher Gort, what kind of metal do you think this is? Liszt shook the bottle. It should be empty. There was no movement inside. Gort spread his hands. Gold, silver, copper, iron. This is not any metal I have ever seen. Please forgive me for not knowing what it is. It doesn't have a mouth? It looks like a hole. I have carefully checked where the mouth of the bottle should be. There is no gap. I can't twist it. Liszt tried it with his hand and really couldn't twist it. There was no cap on the mouth of the bottle. It was a solid hole. What do you think is inside? A bottle of wine? Sweet dreams don't always come true. Teacher Gort, I don't think there is any liquid inside. Gort laughed. Huh, you can always fantasize about it before it's opened. Liszt handed the bottle to Carter and had Carter put it back in his study. Keep it first. When I have time, I will slowly figure out how to open it. Yes, master. After Carter left, Liszt motioned for Gort to find a place to sit. He asked, how is the caravan trade going? Everything is going smoothly. Since you started to develop the flower town and provided a large number of paid jobs, the fief's residents gradually have extra money and can pick some small goods from the caravan stalls. Almost half of the merchants' goods have been sold. Even the burlesque stage has been thrown a few copper coins. Comedy shows were usually hired by caravans who pooled their money together. They were open to the public for free to attract customers. Only when the audience was happy would they throw some coins on the stage as a reward for these clowns. The flower town was poor. Perhaps the residents would laugh until their stomachs hurt, reluctant to throw out a copper coin. He didn't expect that someone would actually tip the clowns. Who were the people who threw the copper coins? I only saw one person throw a coin. Your kitchen maid, Irene Four Fingers. Irene Four Fingers? List didn't have much contact with the kitchen maid. He didn't even see her once in a day. The status of kitchen maids was very low. They weren't allowed to go upstairs, appear in the hall on the first floor, and hang around in front of nobles. He only knew from Butler Carter that Irene was a straightforward and candid little girl. Young people are always very generous, he commented. Gore wanted to say that he was also a young man, only 16 years old, not as old as the little girl. But he didn't say it out loud. The current List had the maturity and steadiness of a middle-aged man. When dealing with people, it was almost impossible to ignore his slightly immature face. Perhaps this is the talent brought about by aristocratic blood. Gord often thought so. At first, he followed List to the Flower Town just to get a free meal and drink as an advisor. At his age, he no longer expected to revitalize the family business and restore the glory of the aristocracy. Unexpectedly, not only did List change the Flower Town, but he also changed his idea of idling around. Gort knew very well that Freya's pregnancy was just a prelude. In the final analysis, it was List's will that determined the behavior of the people around him. Otherwise, there was no need to pay so much attention to an illegitimate child. Which aristocrat did not have a few illegitimate children outside? For the sake of family harmony, many aristocratic illegitimate children could only be serfs for life. Teacher Gort. Seeing that Gort was a little distracted, List couldn't help but remind him. Gort immediately sat up straight. Go ahead. As an official, you have to supervise every transaction of the caravan. Profiteers are not allowed to harm civilians. At the same time, patrols and clerks are not allowed to take things from the caravan. Please rest assured, I will emphasize this point every day. The publicity work must be done well. Publicize that the Flower Town welcomes outsiders to settle down and that taxes are the most favorable. Also, tell the people of the caravan how the Flower Town will develop next. Show them the plans for the commercial district, workshop district, and residential district, so that they can feel the bright future of the Flower Town. As you wish. After sending off Gort, List did not immediately go for a lunch break. He went straight to the study and played with the metal bottle on the desk. He was very interested in this floating bottle. He concentrated for a moment and called out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward, see drift bottle. Mission, the bottle that cannot be opened, the text that cannot be understood. This is due to the difference in knowledge, but it does not mean that it cannot be solved. The blind old leathersmith of the leathersmith's shop feels that his health is getting worse. Give him a son, and he might be willing to exchange a book for it. Mission reward, unknown book. As expected, the metal bottle picked up by the fisherman was the reward for the smoke mission. The caravan's mission of 3 gold coins was completed early on. But when he saw the new mission, List didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The bottle that cannot be opened doesn't mean that I cannot open the drift bottle. The text that cannot be understood doesn't mean that there's a note inside, maybe in a foreign language. However, what the hell is the content of the mission? Give the old leathersmith a son? If the other party's wife was in her prime, graceful, and charming, List would not mind giving the other party a son and a hat. However, he had carefully read the information of the town's craftsmen during the census. He had an impression of the old leathersmith. He was a widower with no relatives or friends. He had come to the Flower Town 10 years ago by begging, settled down in the Flower Town, and picked up his skills as a leathersmith. How could he give such a person a son? Give him a son? Maybe my thinking is a bit off track. I should first have someone investigate the old leathersmith. He shook the bell and called Carter. Master, Mr. Carter, have someone send a letter to Teacher Gort and have him investigate the old leathersmith in the town. The information must be detailed. If the other party has any difficulties, you can help him along the way. Carter said, Master, maybe you should ask Jesse. He is very familiar with the old leathersmith. Jesse? Jesse Ricewater used to be the castle's serving man assistant. He had been promoted to serving man and was mainly responsible for running errands for the castle. After a while, Jesse, who was playing in the town, was called back. Master, you were looking for me? Even though he had become a serving man, he was still a bit ill at ease when facing List, not knowing where to put his hands. List asked directly, "You are very familiar with the old leathersmith? Tell me about the old leathersmith." "You mean Uncle Phil?" "I got no Uncle Phil when I went to the leathersmith's shop to mend leather shoes. Uncle Phil is blind, so it is very inconvenient for him to work. Now that his health is getting worse, I often visit him and help him with some things." Chapter 92. Does Uncle Phil want a son? Jesse was taken aback at first, but then he nodded. "It seems so. I have heard him complain that he has no son and that there is no one to take care of him when he is sick." List looked at Jesse. Suddenly, he asked, "Jesse, if I remember correctly, you seem to be an orphan?" "Yes, master. I grew up in the Coral Cities orphanage." "Thank you for the generosity of the Tulip family for letting us orphans live," said Jesse piously. Orphanages were institutions for aristocrats to take in orphans. Accidents were always happening to commoners, leaving a few children unattended. In order to show their benevolence, some wealthy aristocrats would set up orphanages in their families' fiefs and take in orphans. After they grew up, they would directly work for the castle. Jesse was such an orphan. "Is the old leathersmith in the leathersmith shop?" "Yes, master. I had wanted to invite Uncle Phil to go shopping with me, but he was unwilling." "In that case, Jesse, come with me to see the old leathersmith. I have something to discuss with him." "All right. I will prepare a horse for you, master." On the horse field outside the castle, there was a crudely constructed lounge. Philip and Xavier had been standing guard here. As retainer knight, they did not enjoy the benefits of a holiday. Seeing List mount Fiery Dragon, they each mounted a horse and followed List. Together, they went to the leathersmith shop. In every small town, there were leathersmith shops. Leathersmiths were craftsmen who made leather, sewed fur coats, and mended leather shoes. Subdivided, there were leathersmiths, saddlers, drummers, leathersmiths, shoemakers, and so on. Generally speaking, shoemakers were the majority. The Flower Town's old leathersmith, Phil, was a shoemaker. In big cities, shoemakers were often wealthy freedmen, as a pair of leather shoes cost a lot of money. But in small towns, shoemakers were treated poorly. Few people could afford to wear leather shoes. Therefore, the leathersmith shop could only make ends meet. Most serfs and freedmen wore wooden and straw sandals. Of course, even more people did not wear shoes. "Is that Jesse?" The old leathersmith's somewhat hoarse voice came from the table. He was currently repairing a pair of leather shoes. Even though he was blind, his hands were still nimble. Jesse hurriedly said, "Uncle Phil, Sir Lord is here. Sir Lord is looking for you." "Ah, Sir Lord. Old Phil sends his regards to Sir Lord." The old leathersmith hurriedly stood up from his chair and bowed in greeting. Just like any other commoner who saw their lord, he was so nervous that his hands trembled. List sized up the narrow and dark leathersmith shop. He could see that the shop had been in disrepair for many years. The sun in the sky could be seen from the roof. Like the old leathersmith, he showed signs of old age and decay. "Old Phil, don't be nervous. I'm just here to chat with you." The old leathersmith's turbid eyes did not reveal any change in his emotions. However, List sensed that the other party's hands had quickly stopped trembling. This was not a sign that the nervousness had subsided. It looked more like the performance had stopped. Perhaps the nervousness from before was just an act. This was easy to understand. After all, aristocrats liked to see commoners trembling in front of them. The old man had long since learned to deal with life. "Sir Lord, it is old Phil's honor to chat with the noble you. You begged 10 years ago and settled in the Flower Town. Then, where are you originally from?" "I was born on the Dodo Island, Sir Lord." "Dodo Island?" "It is a deserted island without a lord to govern it. It is further north of the Coral Island. There's a kind of dodo bird living on the island. It can't fly, and it sounds like dodo. There's also a particularly tall tree with a scary name. It's called Human Skull Tree, and its fruit is called Human Skull Fruit." "Skull Tree?" "Yes, Sir Lord. The fruit is white. From a distance, it looks like a human skull. However, it tastes delicious. The island's natives eat skull fruit to alleviate their hunger. Dodos also eat skull fruit. However, dodo bird meat is particularly unpalatable. Life on the island is very difficult. The dodo bird that sounds like a dodo. It reminded List of the extinct dodo bird on Earth. He didn't know if the dodos here were the same species as the ones on Earth. So, how did you come to the coral island from the dodo bird? Since you were born on the dodo island, you should be a native. Then, where do the natives of the dodo island come from? List asked. There were still many undeveloped, deserted islands in the periphery of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The dodo island should be one of them. I am a native of the dodo island. I don't know where we came from. As far as I can remember, we all lived on the dodo island. Later on, the dodo volcano erupted and a large number of skull trees were destroyed. Without food, we had to cut down trees to make canoes and drift along the sea. At that time, I drifted to the hot spring island and became a leathersmith's apprentice. Subsequently, the hot spring island suffered from the chaos of war, and he was sold as a slave to the coral island. At that time, he was bought by a baron on the island. Later on, the baron followed the count to the battlefield, never to return. All of the fief's sprite worms died. Fearing punishment, the serfs began to flee. The old leathersmith also fled. After many twists and turns, he arrived at the flower town. At that time, the serfs all spread a rumor that the baron died in battle because his retainer knight, who was a serf, betrayed him. His followers were very angry and decided to slaughter all the serfs in the fief to avenge the baron. As the old leathersmith spoke of the past, he sighed endlessly. Perhaps he was lamenting his own ignorance at that time. This was a low-level rumor. Aristocrats attached great importance to serfs. The correct explanation should be, the baron died in battle and had no heir. The lord he followed, namely, the Earl of Coral Island, reclaimed his fief, including the serfs. In short, the old leathersmith's life was not full of ups and downs, nor was he a person with a story. Even his blindness had naturally happened while he was in the flower town. The only thing that could barely be regarded as a story was his identity as a native of the Dodo Island. List carefully inquired about the Dodo Island situation and found out that it was only a very small island with no more than 300 natives. In the end, it was destroyed by a volcanic eruption. Apart from the few skull trees that remained, there was probably no development value. He was somewhat disappointed. He had thought that the person specifically mentioned by the smoke mission should be somewhat mysterious. He did not expect that it would be just an ordinary native. He still intended to complete the mission and obtain the book as a reward. He had brought Jesse with him in order to give him to the old leathersmith as a son. An orphan without parents, a widower without children, the two of them hit it off very well. It should be easy for them to form a father and son contract. But suddenly, he had a bold idea. Why should I follow in the smoke mission's footsteps? I'm not its puppet. I can directly ask the old leathersmith for the book, instead of relying on missions to obtain it. List did not think that the old leathersmith had a lot of books. Therefore, he went straight to the point. Old Phil, I heard that you have a collection of books. I hope that you can sell them to me. Since the Sir Lord had spoken, the old leathersmith did not dare to disobey. He immediately agreed. Yes, Sir Lord. I have a collection of books, but only one. I will offer it to Sir Lord. After saying that, he stooped and, with Jesse's help, fished out a wooden box from the cabinet filled with leather shoes. Jesse, the book is in the box. Take it to Sir Lord. Jesse opened the box, took out a very thick book, and handed it to List. List swept it with a glance and found that the book was not printed, but handwritten notes. The cover was written in serpentines in another foreign language. He did not understand the foreign language. Chapter 93. Serpentine was the common language of the Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom. As a vassal state, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire also used Serpentine. In addition to Serpentine, there were also many other languages on the continent, such as the Eagle Kingdom's Wind language, the Blast Furnace Kingdom's Rock language, the Unsetting Radiance Empire's High Clear language, the Blue Dragon Empire's Dragon language, and so on. List's predecessor did not know foreign languages, so he did not recognize the strange characters on it. In fact, if he looked carefully, it would be better to say that it was not so much characters, but rather distorted drawings. The Diary of a Descendant of Philip's Sons, a very strange title. Old Phil, what language is this other text? He asked curiously. I do not know, Sir Lord. In fact, I am illiterate. This book is a relic of a native of the fairy island. He was a good friend of mine. I was in the same canoe with him, but he died at sea, leaving only this book. I keep it as a souvenir, so it is a relic with commemorative value. Then, I will return it to you after I finish reading it. No, Sir Lord. It is Old Phil's honor that you have taken a fancy to Old Phil's book collection. Old Phil hopes that you can accept it. Thank you, Sir Lord. Old Phil's leathersmith shop's business is much better now. All right, I will buy it. Old Phil is willing to offer it to Sir Lord to express my respect for Sir Lord. I accept your respect, but I will still give you a reward. List returned to the castle with the diary. He had Carter take out 3 silver coins and hand them to Jesse. A book was not worth 3 silver coins, but it was, after all, a relic with commemorative value. Jesse, give these 3 silver coins to Old Phil as a reward for this book. In addition, tell Old Phil that I like his stories very much. If he wants to add anything, he can do so at any time. Yes, master. After Jesse left, List did not immediately open the book, but instead summoned the smoke mission. A moment later, a faint smoke appeared in front of him, twisting into serpentines. What made List pleasantly surprised and nervous was that the serpentines were no longer the usual words. They were changing. The mission has changed. The serpentines persisted for a few seconds before the smoke gradually distorted, forming new serpentines. Mission: unlike other worm stalks that safely enjoy nutrition, the bramble sprite's worm grass gazes into the distance in solitude. It has already lived for 8 years and is about to enter old age. However, its heart is still unwilling. Please supplement the bramble sprite's worm grass with nutrition. The mission reward is a new type of thorns. His uneasy heart settled back into his stomach, and all that was left was surprise. It was a little risky for him to say goodbye to the smoke mission and announce that he was not a puppet that could only be led around. However, in his heart, he was actually very worried that he would lose the smoke mission. Whether the smoke mission was a cheat or a mastermind behind the scenes, it was not something he could refuse. Moreover, there was no need to refuse. So far, the smoke mission had only benefits and no drawbacks. It helped him develop quickly. Even if there was a mastermind behind it, he probably couldn't resist it. Since he couldn't resist, he would just enjoy it. As a result, some despicable thoughts still lingered in his mind. If I can ride on a dragon, so what if I sell the 50 kilograms to the mastermind? As long as you let me enjoy the glory and splendor, the mastermind behind the scenes, I am willing to be your lackey. There was no response. Smoke missions sometimes had very little sense of existence. Now it seemed he was at loggerheads with the smoke mission, but the smoke mission would not be at loggerheads with him. And it also proved that those mission rewards were not forcibly fabricated by the smoke mission. They originally existed. The smoke mission at most pushed the boat with the current, fiddled with the threads of cause and effect, and prized some of the trajectory of time. Like a gust of wind, gently blowing the waves of the river of fate, whether it rotated left or right, it would eventually fall back into the river and return to calmness. Maybe one day, I will understand the meaning of the existence of the smoke mission. As for now, I will just enjoy the cheat. With an open-minded mind, he shook off the worrying thoughts. What was left was full of joy. He saw the familiar word, new species, in the new mission reward. There were 2 new species missions before. The new species of tulip brought the magic ingredient black tulip, and a new species of mushroom brought the magic ingredient flame mushroom. What kind of magic ingredient would the new species of thorns bring this time? Not enough nutrition, right? Tomorrow, let the serfs transport the compost to the thorns worm's worm stalk to supplement it with nutrition. The only regretful thing was that the thorns worm had lived for 8 years, which meant that it only had 2 years left to live. It seems that I have to find a way to get another thorns worm. There seems to be a young thorns worm in Tulip Castle. I should buy it sometime. Thorns were just small, weed-like shrubs. The thorns worm was not of much use, so the price should not be too high. He waved his hand to disperse the smoke serpentines. Liszt returned his gaze to the diary of a descendant of Philip the Son. A descendant of Philip the Son. This surname is a bit domineering. My retainer knight is also called Philip, but his surname was obviously the difference between a chicken and a phoenix when compared to the author. Liszt turned to the first page and saw a very abstract picture of the sun. Because it was handwritten, the sun was not very round, and the surrounding light was also a triangular smear. There were all kinds of messy stripes inside the sun. It looked like a 7-year-old child's doodle. Below the picture, there was a paragraph of serpentines, perhaps a poem. Grandpa has such a tattoo on his back. He said that his father also had the same tattoo on his back. I asked him why my father didn't have it on his back, and neither did mine. He said that our ancestors had abandoned us, and that we could no longer bear the sun pattern. I don't understand what it means. Grandpa said that we were exiled from our hometown to the land of sin, and that we could only return after 500 years. 500 years later, a large ship sailing in the sky, under the sun, welcomed us back. 500 years have passed, but the ship in the sky has not come. Looking at the poem, Liszt found it very interesting. The description in the poem was that the author's ancestors were a group of sinners and were exiled to the Dodo Island for 500 years. They tattooed a sun pattern on their back to represent their lineage. But 500 years later, the ship in the sky that was supposed to take them back did not come. So the author's grandfather felt abandoned and did not tattoo his son again. So this is how the descendants of the sun came to be. If the record is true, the natives of the Dodo Island should be the descendants of the great nobles of the continent. Only the great nobles, especially the descendants of the royal family, would be exiled after making a mistake. If the lesser nobles made a mistake, they would be directly killed. But without the habit of recording history, the royal family would probably forget about these exiled descendants in about 100 years. On the first page, there was a picture and a poem. On the second page, there was a preface. My name is Philip, 26 this year. I have just returned from working on the outer island. I did not intend to go out again. The outside is very prosperous, but life is difficult. I intend to stay on the Dodo Island and marry Valiza. I will have my own son and raise him. I am a carpenter. I can build a big house for him to live in. From today onwards, I will record every day. This way, when I am old, I will not be like my grandfather, forgetting his story, forgetting even where we came from. My son, because of my diary, will understand what interesting experiences his father once had. But I don't have too much thick bass paper and ink. I have to write sparingly. Write a little smaller, a little smaller. Chapter 94. Grand Duchy Year 119, February 15th. This was the starting time of the first entry in the diary of a descendant of Philip's son. This year is the year 151 of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. In other words, this diary was written 32 years ago. Listed some simple calculations. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire did not have an official calendar, but it also did not use the calendar of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. The concept of history was not popular in other worlds. Generally speaking, people did not have any ideas about what happened in the past. They did not have the idea of using history as a guide. Therefore, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire did not even have a national day. The Seagoing Festival and the New Year's Day were the most important festivals. Sometimes the founding anniversary celebration would be held during the Seagoing Festival. Sometimes it would be arranged during the New Year's Day, and sometimes it would be casually celebrated on a day. This was carried out according to the wishes of the Sapphire Grand Duke. List's analysis of this was that the concept of patriotism had not been spread out. The subtlety of the aristocratic system was reflected in the structure of knight enfeoffment. The greatest connotation was, the subject of my subject is not my subject. The master of my lord is not my lord. For example, List's master was the Earl of Coral Island, but not the Sapphire Grand Duke. Therefore, as a subject of the Earl, he did not need to pay attention to the Sapphire Grand Duke. The Sapphire family could not order him. For him, his real kingdom was the Coral Island, not the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. If he wanted to love someone, it was the Coral Island, not the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. All aristocrats were lords. Even the king was just a slightly larger lord. Naturally, it was impossible to form a broad sense of patriotism. This was also why the seagoing festival was only commemorated by the aristocracy, while the commoners were simply unwilling to pay attention to it. In the Flower Town, the celebration of List's birthday was definitely more important than the seagoing festival in the minds of the subjects. Sir Lord, who granted me land, is like a parent to me. Who is a Grand Duke? Could he be eaten, steamed, or braised? List's train of thought was interrupted. List continued to browse the diary. Ching, climb the trees and pick the fruits. Gather 10 human skull fruits. Chop down 3 trees. Dig the foundation and prepare to build a house. Sorting out the knowledge that Grandpa taught me, the X in Sanskrit represents I. I am a descendant of the sun, and my ancestors spoke Sanskrit. This X represented a very distorted character. It was very complicated and looked like a painting. It was like a little person with wings, holding some kind of object in his hand and dancing. Each word is like a painting. Which country's language is this? It's too strange. I can guarantee that if it's written in this language, you won't be able to learn 500 words even if you're 100 years old. List lamented. Of course, this was an exaggeration, but it was true that this so-called Sanskrit was very complicated. Following that, many pages of the diary were unimportant records of life. Picking fruits, chopping wood, building houses, exchanging items with so-and-so, and seeing wild beasts. But at the end of every diary entry, there would be a Sanskrit. I, dad, mom, grandpa, grandmother, big, rice, earth, sky, earth, horse, flower, get 10, picture up. There were some words that Philip specifically explained. For example, rice referred to a certain kind of grain, horse referred to a unicorn, and flower referred to a sunflower. He had never seen them before, but he had heard from Grandpa that they were things that were common to his ancestors. Unicorn? Is there really such a legendary animal? List expressed his doubts. He even expressed his doubts about these Sanskrits. They were just drawings of little people. He didn't think that these drawings represented any kind of language. It could be that Philip's grandfather came up with them to fool his silly grandson. A thick diary. Almost all of it was about Philip's boring daily life on the Dodo Island, as well as the teaching of Sanskrit. Occasionally, he would recall his working life on the outer islands. He met the daughter of a noble, a very kind lady who taught them the language of commoners. Philip proudly said that he was the fastest learner and was valued by the noble lady. He even wanted to elope with her. But unfortunately, in one of the entries in the diary, the noble lady's mother found out about him and wanted to kill him. So Philip escaped the island with the help of the noble lady. He didn't say which island, saying that he didn't want to tarnish the noble lady's reputation. Apart from these things, the diary occasionally mentioned Philip's ancestors, mainly the stories his grandfather told him. For example, the ancestors raised a group of magical dragons with 2 heads. The ancestors had shot down the sun in the sky. The ancestors drew extraordinary power from the well. The ancestors lived in cities that grew out of trees. The ancestors were friends with wolves, bears, eagles, and tigers, and the ancestors were immersed in music. His grandfather called the ancestors the children of the sun. So, the question is, why did the children of the sun shoot down the sun? Patricide? The story was fragmentary and vague. The main thing was that Philip wrote very briefly. He was worried that he didn't have enough ink and thick bass paper to write, so the more he wrote, the less he wrote. He even wrote once every few days. The thick bass paper was already half written. He probably understood that this diary could not record every little thing in his boring life. I can change the title to The Private Teaching Record of the Sun. List was about to close the diary. He didn't find any connection between the diary and the bottle that couldn't be opened. He thought that he might as well smash the metal bottle. See what was in it. But just as he closed the book, because he closed it from the back to the front, the last page closed at the end, he suddenly found out from the corner of his eye that this page was not blank. He flipped it open. he discovered that it was another diary, or rather, an essay. My last words. Before my grandfather left, he told me that if one day a golden bottle was found on the sea, it would be a letter written to us by our ancestors. Our ancestors mastered a method of sending letters on the sea. The bottle filled with magic would follow the guidance of the bloodline and travel to and fro the sea. As long as the blood is smeared, the bottle can be opened and the letter can be taken out. I don't believe it, but my descendants, if one day you find it, remember to reply. This was the will written by the descendants of Philip Tai Yong to their descendants. So it was placed at the end of the diary. After reading it, List couldn't stay calm. The bottle that Philip was talking about must be the bottle that the fisherman picked up from the beach, which was now on his desk. Does this mean that the story of Philip and his grandfather is actually true, that they are really the exiled descendants of a noble family? Is the Sun language also true? He recalled the previous task. It said the bottle that can't be opened, the words that can't be read, and that he needed a book to guide him. There was no doubt that it was this book. Picking up the bottle, List went straight out of the study. My lord, are you going out? I'm going to the leathersmith's shop. Mr. Carter, you stay in the castle and let Jesse come with me. By the way, is Jesse back yet? He remembered that Jesse had been sent to deliver the silver coins. Not yet. He should have gone to the town to watch a farce. You know, young people always like to join in on the fun. Chapter 95. Old Phil, cut your finger. I need you to smear your blood on this bottle. List said in an indisputable tone. Philip was already dead, and it was unknown how many natives of the Dodo Island were left. The old leathersmith before him was probably one of them. As for whether he had the bloodline of the descendants of the sun, he did not know. He could only give it a try. Although the old leathersmith did not understand, he had to do as the Sir Lord commanded. He pricked his finger with a needle, squeezed out his blood, and smeared it on the beautiful golden bottle. List had already cast magic eyes. He stared intently at the metal bottle. The moment the blood came into contact with the metal bottle, his whirlpool-like pupils suddenly widened, because he saw a magical scene. As if touched by the blood, faint magic power gushed out of the metal bottle and spread along the engraved patterns, quickly outlining the lines of the sun, a tree, a bow and arrow, a zither, an eagle, and a bear. A man made of lines emerged from the bottle, picked up the bow and arrow, and shot an arrow at the sun. A woman made of lines emerged from the bottle, picked up the zither, and gently played it under the tree. The eagle landed on the man's shoulder. The bear snuggled up to the woman, and the magic lines on the bottle were vivid and lively. Suddenly, the sun with the arrow on it fell, and a well made of lines appeared, spurting a fountain straight to the mouth of the bottle. Asterisk crack. Asterisk a crisp sound echoed. All the lines made of magic power dissipated, and no trace of magic power could be seen on the metal bottle. The mouth of the bottle, which was originally seamless, unexpectedly cracked. List gently pulled it out with his hand, and the bottle cap fell off. He shook the mouth of the metal bottle downward, and something rolled up into a small stick fell out. It was a very fine, light parchment. List unfolded the parchment. Impressively, there was a line of drawings of little people on it. No, to be precise, it should be a line of sun characters. List had an impression of these drawings of little people, but he could not make out what they meant. There were many puzzles in his mind waiting to be solved. On the surface, he was not the least bit anxious. He rolled up the parchment and glanced at the old leathersmith. Old Phil, are you related to Philip? I don't know, Sir Lord. Perhaps Philip said that we are all exiled sinners. In fact, they should be related. Looking at the old leathersmith's stooped figure and aged expression, List felt that he should complete the last mission issued by the smoke. At the very least, he should give the old leathersmith a son, or, at the very least, he should form a contract with Jesse. Regardless of whether it was from a moral point of view or if it was to help the mission, what should he do? Phil, what do you think of Jesse? Jesse is a very good boy. He always comes to help me with things, diving, sweeping. Thanks to him, the cobbler's shop smells so much better. Jesse is an orphan, you know. I know. Have you ever thought that the two of you could form a contract as father and son? What this? The old leatherworker was obviously a little alarmed. Jesse is a servant of the castle, and I'm just an old leatherworker. He has the means to live a better life, and I don't want to burden him. Sir Lord, Jesse is a sensible child. He likes his work in the castle and is very hard-working. I will ask him not to come here again so as not to delay his work. He thought that his relationship with Jesse had made the Sir Lord unhappy. You misunderstand. I have no intention of blaming Jesse. It is just a suggestion. Liz suddenly felt that doing this was a bit unfitting of his status as a noble. Why would the Lord care about the trivial matters of commoners? He got up and was about to leave the cobbler's shop, saying, "You decide this matter yourselves. I will hand it over to Mr. Carter to preside over. Success or failure, it was just a suggestion." After returning to the castle, he casually spoke to Carter, then directly put aside these chores and began to devote himself to translating the notes from the floating bottle. Comparing the diary of a descendant of Philip's son, he found the corresponding meanings of the little figures one by one. Soon, he had finished translating the note. The tower has collapsed. The tree city is burning. XX has perished. The child of the sun will rise with the flames. The children of the outside world, you are free. Among them, XX was a group of sun characters, but there was no corresponding explanation in the diary, and the style of the drawing was rather abstract. Liz could not see its specific meaning, but he could roughly guess that it should represent the habitat of the child of the sun. Perhaps it was a country, perhaps it was a continent. In other words, the floating bottle had brought bad news. The child of the sun, which country's aristocracy calls itself that. Liszt had read at least 100 night novels, if not 1,000, but there was no record of the child of the sun rubbing the parchment in his hand. He suddenly felt that this country was probably not a mainland country. The paper on the mainland is thick bast paper made of animal leather, which is not easy to preserve and is not convenient to write on. But the parchment in my hand does not seem to be made of animal leather. It is very thin. This technology has not yet appeared on the mainland. But apart from the mainland countries, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was the first country to go to sea and establish a country. Immediately, Liszt thought of a possibility. Is it possible that the child of the sun is not a human of this continent, but on the other side of the Aquamarine Sea? The east coast of Flower Town faced the Aquamarine Sea, and the other side of the Aquamarine Sea was the legendary Devil Sea. No one could sail in the Devil Sea. The legend was not credible. If this other world was also a planet, then perhaps the so-called Devil's Sea was just a larger ocean than the sea on Earth. On the other side of the ocean, there may be a continent. There was an impassable ocean between the continents. Perhaps there was another continent where humans lived. Well, there is too little information to make any effective judgments. Let's assume that there is a continent on the other side, and there is a group of humans called the Child of the Sun. Liszt took back his distant thoughts. For the time being, I don't have the ability to solve this mystery. He put the metal floating bottle into the gem space, but he did not cap the bottle, in case it could not be opened. The thin parchment was also put into the gem space, as well as the diary of a descendant of the son of Philip. Now it's time to shift our focus to the Thorns worm. At the age of 8, the Thorn Sprite worm was unwilling to die of old age alone and wanted to fight with all its might. Liszt could feel that this Thorn Sprite worm was indeed somewhat different from other sprite worms. He arrived at the worm house, which was under the care of Carter, and saw the Thorn Sprite sleeping soundly in a box. Sprite worms could sleep 24 hours a day. The faintly discernible spiritual connection allowed Liszt to understand his sprite worms at all times. Little guy, I can feel the lethargy in your body, and I can also feel your desire for evolution. Although I know that there is little hope for you to evolve, I'm still willing to help you and do my best. Not for the thorn potion and the completion of the smoke mission. Liszt muttered to himself as he gently stroked the gray body of the thornworm. The thorn sprite worm seemed to have sensed the arrival of Liszt. It opened its sesame-sized eyes and turned to look at Liszt. Among the 7 sprite worms, it was the ugliest one. It was darker in color than the other sprite worms, and its body was more slender and its skin was harder. Sprite worms bred by woody plants, such as shrubs and trees, would always appear rougher than sprite worms bred by herbaceous plants. Its black eyes were indiscernible. However, Liz could feel that the thorn sprite worm was close and docile to him. Chapter 96. The thorn sprite worm's stalk grew on the dairy farm, close to the edge of the Thorns Ridge in a small thorns forest. The reason why the Thorns Ridge was so named was that there were many short thorns on the periphery. However, thorns rarely grew on a large scale. Instead, they grew in small patches of 2s and 3s. List, who had investigated this, guessed that the reason was probably because thorns were shrubs, short trees without an obvious trunk and in a clump state. The correct name for a thorns forest should be a thorn shrub. Attached to the edge of the arbor forest, the tall arbor blocked the sun and limited the growth of the shrubs. The thorn sprite worm is unwilling, apart from the lack of nutrition. It is also likely due to the growth of the thorns forest. The arbor blocks the expansion of the thorn shrub. South of the thorn sprite worm stalk was the dairy farm. It was impossible for List to shovel the pasture and plant worthless thorns. Therefore, he intended to organize a logging team to cut down the surrounding trees of the thorn shrub to provide for the thorns to expand outwards. The more thorns there were, the wider the range of influence of the thorn sprite worm, the more pheromones it could collect, and the greater the possibility of evolution. In fact, he understood that it was almost impossible for the thorn sprite worm to evolve. There were too few varieties of thorns, and the collection of pheromones was difficult. The probability was too low. Although I do not know the essential reason for the evolution of the sprite worm, the more plant varieties the worm stalk belongs to, the greater the possibility of the sprite worm evolving. Affecting the growth of the plant will also increase the probability of the sprite worm evolving. This was something that could be followed from experience. The tulip family had collected a large number of tulip varieties for several generations. It was precisely by relying on these tulip varieties that the greater sprite Xianxia, as well as 3 lesser sprites and 8 sprite worms were cultivated. Of course, it was not that the thorn sprite worm had no chance to evolve. It was still necessary to have a dream, just in case it came true. I will do what I can. The rest is up to the thorn's sprite worm itself, whether or not it is truly unwilling to challenge its fate. After stroking the thorn sprite worm, List left the worm house. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the person in charge of the North Valley City caravan came to the castle and bid farewell to List. The person in charge, a bearded middle-aged man named Gabriel, bowed deeply. "Sir Baron, under your governance, the flower town has shone with dazzling light. Thank you for your generosity and kindness. The caravan had a wonderful day in Flower Town. Now, Gabriel takes his leave. Are you satisfied with the trade the caravan made in town?" List asked with a smile. "Very satisfied, Sir Baron." The faces of the caravan members are brimming with harvest smiles. "We sold a lot more goods here than we expected and also purchased some specialties of Flower Town. Personally, I like the environment of the commercial district very much. There are no more problems with feces." "So, Gabriel, does the caravan have a plan? When will they come again?" "Not yet. However, I think that the road through the Thorns Ridge is already safe. The caravan will not wait too long. Perhaps after a month, we will be loaded with goods and come to the Flower Town to trade. The Flower Town welcomes the caravan at any time." "Thank you, Sir Baron." Gabriel bowed and left the castle. The caravan returned to the caravan, which had already tidied up its goods from the commercial district and was slowly setting out on its journey. Horses pulled carriages along the road, paved with gravel and sea sand. Illuminated by the setting sun, they headed in the direction of the Thorns Ridge. When they came, they were loaded with goods. When they left, they were full of laughter. There was also the beautiful sound of gold coins, silver coins, and copper coins colliding with each other. After a while, old Grandette came forward to report on the shopping. Apart from the 2 foals, there were a lot of things which were handed over to the butler carter and placed in the castle's cellar. List, who didn't like these mundane tasks, went straight to the stud farm to look at the foals. The two foals in the stud farm were probably just born. They were very afraid of strangers and hid in a corner of the stable, not daring to run around. They were very ordinary breeds, one brownish-red, the other brownish-yellow. Even though Liz didn't know much about horses, he could still see that they couldn't go to the battlefield. Is it a mare or a stallion? A mare and a stallion, sir. Jim, who was feeding foals, replied. Take care of them. Don't let other horses bully them. Yes, sir. Soon after, Liz circled around a separate fence. There were a few pregnant mares eating wheat bran and peas, and no changes could be seen. When Fiery Dragon saw him arrive, it affectionately leaned over and stuck its head out of the fence. List reached out and patted it. He was looking forward to whether the foal it gave birth to would be as spirited as Black Dragon. It might even be mixed with World of Warcraft's bloodline. Maybe its foal would be even more spirited than Black Dragon. The banquet. It was time to celebrate the caravan's successful transaction in the Flower Town, as well as the time to report on the work. Sir Baron, the transaction amounted to a total of 7 gold coins, 63 silver coins, and 12 copper coins. In accordance with the low-tax rate preferential plan you formulated, the fixed booth tax and the 20% first-rate mobile tax amounted to a total of 18 silver coins and 15 copper coins. Isaiah gave a detailed report on the taxes. Caravan transactions definitely had to be taxed. Normally, lords would tax foreign caravans at a rate of 1 in 10, which was a tenth of the transaction's value. Some harsh lords might adopt the standard of 1% of the transaction value, which was 5% of the transaction value. In the Flower Town, in order to attract caravans, List greatly reduced the tax rate. He set 2 standards. One was the fixed booth tax. After paying the booth tax, it was a fixed amount of 1 silver coin. No matter how much the transaction value was, there would be no additional tax. The other was the 20% mobile tax. In other words, instead of paying the booth tax, a tax of 1% of the total transaction value would be collected. This gave merchants a choice. If they felt that their transaction value was more than 20 silver coins, it would be worthwhile to pay the fixed tax. If it was less than 20 silver coins, it would be worthwhile to pay the mobile tax. With the current situation in the Flower Town, there was not much business tax. List did not intend to make a fortune in this regard. The business tax does not need to be remitted to the castle's account. It should be used to build the commercial district. Stalls, parking spaces, livestock stalls, hotels, and toilets should also be repaired in time. In addition, the wells and sewers should be planned together. Although there is plenty of time, I hope to complete them as soon as possible. Please rest assured, sir. Gort nodded in agreement. Carl, tell me about today's public security. Yes, sir. It was not Carl's first time attending a banquet, but he was still cautious. The patrols performed very well. We arrested a total of 13 merchants who urinated and defecated everywhere and punished them with whippings. There was also 1 thief whom Gabriel ransomed. Among the thief's residents, 2 thieves and 3 forced buyers and sellers were caught. List asked, "Did you tell the person in charge of the caravan, Gabriel, that if a thief is caught the first time, he can pay a ransom, but if caught the second time, he will be directly detained and demoted to the thief's laborers?" I've already informed Gabriel. He said that when he returns, he will teach the thieves a good lesson. When the caravan returns, he will make sure that no one disobeys your rules. Carl hesitated for a moment before continuing. My lord, how are we going to punish the 5 criminals? Freedmen or serfs? There is 1 freedman each for the thieves and the forced buyers and sellers, while the remaining 3 are serfs. List looked at Gort. Gort immediately said, Sir, you attach great importance to the caravan trade. You have repeatedly publicized it, yet there are still bold commoners who ignore the rules. They should be severely punished. In my opinion, serfs should be punished with 50 lashes and have all their property confiscated. Freedmen who commit theft should be punished with 10 lashes and 10 times the fine. Those who are unable to pay should be demoted to serfs. As you wish. List agreed. Chapter 97. Before dawn the next day, serfs were busy fishing out manure from the manure cellars of the settlements. The manure was carried by the serfs in the direction of the dairy farms. The disbanded logging team also regrouped. Escorted by the night squad, they arrived at the bushes where the thorns worm stalk was located. Marcus, with a falcon feather arrow on his back, scouted the bushes to make sure that there was no World of Warcraft lurking in the surroundings, then turned to Gort and nodded. "Sir, the surroundings are safe." "That's good." Gort turned around and yelled at the serfs, "Get your spirits up and start working. After taking Sir Lord's copper coins, whoever dares to slack off will definitely be whipped to death by me. Remember, do not touch the thorns. Cut down all the other trees. Do not leave a single one behind." The serfs complied one after another. Then they started cutting down trees. They did not know why they came here to cut down trees, but the town official had ordered them to do so. Moreover, they could get paid 2 copper coins a day. After a short while, the manure team arrived. Gort hurriedly directed the serfs to fertilize the thorns. The treasurer, Isaiah, followed them. He calculated the remuneration of each serf. After counting the number of workers, he recorded the data on thick bass paper. He stretched and chatted with Gort. "What do you think Sir Baron is thinking? Why does he take care of the thorns worm?" "I don't know either, but my lord always has a motive for doing this." "Gort, you are getting more and more involved in the flower town. Why not? The development here is full of vitality. I will probably spend the rest of my life here. Therefore, it is a good thing to develop it, isn't it? I'm not used to living in the barren countryside, but there are still many interesting things to look for in the rich countryside. Of course, no one likes poverty. For Sir, and for ourselves, Isaiah, we have to work hard." Gort glanced at his old friend. Recently, the other party was also a bit tempted to follow List. "I think, yes." The town's officials, Gort, Blair, Carl, and Marcus, all became List followers. As the only official who had yet to follow him, Isaiah naturally felt the pressure. Gort didn't say much. The final decision still depended on Isaiah. "Isaiah, let's go check the thorn shrubs to see if there are any special thorns. Sir has said that the thorn sprout worms have been a little restless recently. Perhaps there's been a change in the thorns bushes. Then what am I waiting for? I have to search carefully. If I find a magic ingredient thorn, TSK, that's right, the shiitake settlement's flame mushroom. Haven't you figured out the ingredients yet?" Gort spread his hands. "It's not that easy. We tried to plant flame mushrooms with all kinds of ingredients, but all of them failed. If it weren't for the flame mushrooms still growing in Crooked Bob's shiitake shed, we might have screwed up the flame mushrooms. Master values the flame mushrooms so much that I don't even know how to report it." The cultivation of the flame mushrooms was in a difficult situation. Gort had already mobilized all the shiitake farmers to distribute the flame mushroom seeds for them to cultivate. Unfortunately, all of them ended in failure. It was said that Crooked Bob had a demonic disease. He stayed in his shed without rest and watched the flame mushrooms grow. However, he couldn't understand why his shed could grow flame mushrooms. After rearranging the ingredients, the flame mushrooms would always wither and die. "Maybe we should tell Sir Baron. Sir Baron will have a good suggestion." "Why do you say that?" "Gort, don't you think that Sir Baron is very knowledgeable? He knows a lot, and his vision is broader than all of us. He can see the vast world that we can't." "Oh, is that how you see, sir?" In fact, it was Marcus who said it. This retainer knight, who wants to be a noble, admires Sir Baron very much. Gort pondered for a moment. "Maybe I should report to Sir Baron. The flame mushrooms is not something that I can show off." He wanted to show himself to win the position of advisor. But he knew that if he messed up the flame mushrooms, List would probably kill him. Anyone could estimate the importance of magic ingredients to a lord. At noon, List came to the thorns worm stalk bush to inspect the progress. He also asked if there were any unusual species of thorns. The officials didn't find anything. List himself used magic eyes and didn't see any unusual thorns. Now he had confirmed that the smoke mission couldn't create rewards out of thin air. The rewards really existed in this world. As long as he was willing to dig, even if he didn't pass the mission, he could still get the reward. This gave him a lot of choices. He could choose to complete the mission and let the smoke mission send the reward to him. It was easy and pleasant. He could also choose to avoid the mission and directly get the reward to refresh the new mission. He even thought that maybe the mission would fail, but he didn't know what kind of punishment there would be after the mission failed. Would it be the punishment to keep the reward away from him, or some other additional punishment? Or, if the mission failed, would there be a new mission? Maybe one day I can try the consequences of failing the mission. However, if I can complete the mission, I should try my best to not create bad consequences. List shook his head. List was no longer confused. Since he couldn't find any abnormalities with the thorns, he could only wait for the mission to be completed to get a new species of thorns. Gort came over. Sir, there may be a problem with the cultivation of the flame mushrooms. What problem? List suddenly became nervous. We arranged for all the serfs who grow the shiitake to get the flame mushroom seeds, but no one succeeded in making the flame mushroom seeds grow. It seems that the flame mushrooms can only grow in Crooked Bob's shiitake shed, but we can't find any difference between his shiitake shed and other shiitake sheds. Almost a month had passed. The flame mushrooms still hadn't been cultivated. List felt that there must be a big problem. In fact, he had been paying attention to it, but he was willing to give the serfs time to solve it. The Lord didn't have to work himself every day. He didn't expect to wait for a month. The distributed flame mushroom seeds didn't show the slightest sign of survival. It stood to reason that the cultivation of mushrooms was very fast. After the spores germinated, it basically took a few days for the mycelium to grow into a fruiting body, and it could be picked in less than 2 months. But the flame mushroom seeds, mycelium, couldn't survive at all. The serfs had already changed various ingredients and environments, but it still didn't work. Without professional scientific research personnel, List could only let Gort lead the way to the shiitake settlement to do on-site research. List wanted to see if he could deduce some reasons with his own knowledge. He arrived at the shiitake settlement. Looking at the haggard, crooked-necked Bob, whose eyes were bloodshot, he immediately knelt on the ground, his whole body trembling. Sir Lord, Bob is a good-for-nothing. He couldn't even cultivate the flame mushrooms for a month. List didn't blame Bob. He just asked Bob about the process of cultivating the flame mushrooms in detail. After listening, he swept his gaze over the flame mushrooms and released magic eyes, trying to find the root of the problem. He looked at the sporadic flame mushrooms growing on the shiitake ingredients, and then looked at the flame mushroom seeds among the new ingredients. He found something that was a little puzzling. For a normal flame mushroom, magic power was a condensation process. Including the flame mushroom seeds it produced, it was also constantly condensing magic power. But after inoculation, the flame mushroom seeds and the new ingredients could not condense magic power and would slowly lose magic power. Chapter 98. List could see the loss of magic power, but he was not a wizard and could not investigate the nature of the loss. But as a scientifically minded transmigrator, he had his own unique views. What is the biggest difference between the shiitake ingredients and the new ingredients? According to Crooked Bob, most mushrooms have similar growth conditions. At most, there are some differences in temperature, humidity, and nutrition. But the flame mushroom can grow in the shiitake ingredients, which shows that it is not so resistant to the shiitake ingredients. After exploring the new ingredients for a long time and trying all kinds of ratios, the flame mushroom seeds still cannot survive. This should not be a problem with the ingredients. If it is not a problem with the ingredients, then what is the problem? After a moment, he made an inference. The biggest difference between the shiitake ingredients and the new ingredients was that the shiitake ingredients grew on the shiitake ingredients. The shiitake settlement had been growing shiitake for many years and had not been invaded by other mushrooms, yet it produced the flame mushroom. This showed that the flame mushroom was likely a variant of shiitake. This kind of mutation might not be the formation of an independent new species, but a kind of companion species in the growth of shiitake mushrooms. Mushrooms were fungi. Fungi were always strange, and the mycelium of shiitake and flame mushroom might be entangled with each other and promote each other. Therefore, he said, Teacher Gort, inform the participating serfs to cultivate the flame mushroom seeds and shiitake seeds together and see if it is possible. Cultivate together? Gort didn't quite understand, but he still did as he was told. When crooked Bob heard List's words, he became spirited. Sir Lord, Bob will try to cultivate together. We must cultivate the flame mushrooms for Sir Lord. Remember not to touch this shiitake shed, and don't destroy the environment in which the flame mushrooms grow. List then gave a heavy warning. It didn't matter if the cultivation of the flame mushrooms was slow. He hadn't reached the realm where he needed to rely on medicine to improve his chi. But if he killed all the flame mushrooms, he would go crazy. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. List went to the thorns worms worm stalk shrubs every day to check on the progress of the fertilization and logging work. The logging team was experienced, especially after the blacksmith shop forged a batch of sharp axes, which increased the efficiency of cutting trees. A large circle of trees around the shrubs were all chopped down. Basically, all the trees in the area that the brambles worm's worm stalk could affect were all cut down. Fiery Dragon quietly ate the weeds. It was pregnant, but it was not obvious. It was normal to ride it. According to Marcus, it will be fine to continue riding it for the next few months. Inside the box, the thorns worm was lying on the jade powder, squirming comfortably. In the past few days, List could clearly feel that the thorn worm was in high spirits and was always in a state of excitement. This was very abnormal. Under normal circumstances, sprite worms had very little emotional fluctuations. After all, no matter how magical a sprite worm was, it was still an insect in essence. An insect could not be expected to show its emotions on its face. Could it be that this little guy really wants to evolve? As soon as this thought appeared, he quickly extinguished it, because the possibility of success was too small. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. It was better not to have unrealistic fantasies. At this moment, Blair, who was in charge of supervision, walked over. "My lord, did you find anything?" Blair was a little hesitant, but he still said, "I don't know if I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but there are many thorny sprouts around the shrubs. They're like grass growing out of the soil. They're already half a finger long." List raised his eyebrows. List followed Blair to check the thorn seedlings. Indeed, in the clearing where the trees were cut down, thorn seedlings emerged from the pile of fallen leaves. They were very young, but very spirited. Thorns were not like the species on Earth. They were simply small thorny shrubs that could grow up to the height of a person. They were not poisonous, did not flower, and did not bear fruit. Their reproduction relied on the continuous expansion of their roots and the growth of new seedlings. Strictly speaking, thorns belonged to the category of weeds, while the thorns worm was a wild sprite. In the untrodden wild jungle, there would always be a small number of naturally bred sprites. However, the wild vegetation was very messy and the land was barren. The probability of sprite worms being bred was very low. It was far less than the species cultivated by humans for a long time, which bred sprite worms. Moreover, it was also difficult to guarantee the species of the sprite worm in the wild. It might be a weed, or it might be a poisonous fruit tree, which had relatively low value. The thorns worm was contracted by humans, and its greatest use was to build hedges. In particular, some greater aristocrats would plant hedges on the periphery of their manors to isolate the aristocrats from the commoners. In Flower Town, the thorns worm was not very useful. The castle outside had been transformed into a horse farm, and there was no need for hedges to isolate it. In any case, it was still a sprite worm, and List still had to cultivate it. "There are so many thorn seedlings here. Did they all grow in the past 2 days?" He gently pulled out a seedling. It was very tender, but there was no trace of magic power flowing on it. "I didn't pay much attention at the beginning." Blair shook his head. "Not only did I not notice, but the serfs also did not notice. It seemed that they grew overnight." List carefully examined it. It was indeed not the magic ingredient thorns he had imagined, but just an ordinary thorn seedling. He decided to summon the smoke mission first to see the situation. When the smoke twisted into serpentines, he suddenly realized, mission completed. Reward: fast-growing thorns. This meant that the Thorns Wormworm's worm stalks nutrition mission had been completed. Unfortunately, the reward was not the magic ingredient thorns, but a kind of fast-growing thorns. Fast-growing thorns, what use do I have for this thing? Liz sighed inwardly. Not every smoke mission would bring him a generous reward. He no longer felt conflicted and turned to look at the newly issued mission. Mission: without the destruction of the fruit-stealing monkeys, the fragrant coconut trees can finally bear mature fragrant coconuts. Only, the fragrant coconuts of one of the fragrant coconut trees seem to be somewhat different. Please find out the reason. Reward: a sprite worm. After reading the mission, the regret he felt just now was quickly soothed and replaced with excitement. Why was the fragrant coconut tree's fragrant coconut different? Because it was breeding a fragrant coconut tree sprite worm. A familiar routine, a familiar reward. List shifted his line of sight away from the thorn's seedling and said to Blair, "Do not stop fertilizing the shrubs. However, stop logging and build fences instead. Keep a close watch and record the growth of the thorn seedlings." "As you wish." After a moment, List appeared in the oyster settlement. The construction of the oyster settlement's houses wasn't fast. With great difficulty, the several hundred serfs were settled down. The houses were no longer built in a disorderly manner. Instead, they were arranged in an orderly manner according to List's personal sketches. There was a huge square near the sea in the residential area. In the square, there was a hill made of colorful shells, symbolizing the oyster settlement's specialty, seafood. On the beach of the East Coast, there were clusters of tall, fragrant coconut trees. Below one of the fragrant coconut trees near the oyster settlement was a slightly larger house and yard, the fruit-stealing monkeys' training ground. The few serfs who were the best at domesticating the fruit-stealing monkeys lived here. They had already been liberated from the fields and the sea to train and raise the fruit-stealing monkeys, becoming glorious, fragrant coconut farmers. "Sir Lord." Upon seeing List, the several fragrant coconut farmers knelt down and saluted. Chapter 99. The East Coast was a few kilometers long, with a total of 171 fragrant coconut trees of various sizes. The small fragrant coconut trees might only be a few meters tall, and some even had just sprouted seedlings. The largest fragrant coconut tree, the one where the winged peregrine falcon and the fruit-stealing monkeys fought, was nearly 60 meters tall and slanted towards the sea. List rode, fiery dragon, and hid in the shade of the tallest fragrant coconut tree. He guessed that if a sprite worm was really born, then it must be this tree king. The worm stalk was far larger, stronger, and more spirited than ordinary plants. If it were before, he would have had to search tree by tree to determine if it was a worm stalk. But now it was different. He directly released magic eyes and looked at the top of the 60-meter-tall, fragrant coconut tree. There was a slight change in his field of vision. Faint light, blue magic power, was circulating in the canopy at the top. It was not very clear, but it was enough. There are traces of magic power. Sure enough, this fragrant coconut tree has already become a worm stalk. My 8th sprite worm is about to arrive. However, this sprite worm climbed a bit high. List thought about it and decided not to investigate himself. Climbing a tree was really unbecoming of a lord. He turned to look at the fruit farmer on the side. "Your name is Giggs. Are you the manager of the fruit-stealing monkeys' training ground?" Giggs nodded hurriedly. "Yes, Sir Lord." "Can you climb trees?" "Yes." "Then climb the tree, and be careful not to damage the bark. Go up and see if there is anything unusual about the fragrant coconut." "Yes, Sir Lord." Giggs immediately used his hands and feet to climb the canopy. Although not as fast as the fruit-stealing monkeys, he was still steady and arrived at the canopy little by little. A moment later, Giggs climbed down and began to report, "My lord, it's very strange. There's a fragrant coconut that looks ripe and very sweet. It's also very, very big. Oh, it's as big as a wash basin." A normal fragrant coconut was about the size of a big bowl. Now that there was a wash basin-sized fragrant coconut, there was no doubt that there was a sprite worm hidden inside. Liz smiled. Giggs, remember, this tree is a worm stalk, and the fragrant coconut is giving birth to my sprite worm. You have to look after this tree for me. You're not allowed to touch the fragrant coconut, and you have to go up and observe it once a day. If the fragrant coconut cracks, inform the castle immediately, understand? Heavens! Is that a sprite worm? Unbelievable! Jiggs was overjoyed and hurriedly replied, Sir Lord, please rest assured, Jiggs will definitely guard the sprite worm. He nodded lightly. List concentrated and summoned the smoke mission. He felt a little smug. He had just completed a smoke mission half an hour ago, and now he had completed another one. This efficiency was too high. As expected, smoke serpentines, mission completed. Reward, fragrant coconut sprite worm. In a flash, a new mission appeared. The new milky bread brought by the caravan made Rainer of the bakery have a flash of inspiration. He wants to make a new kind of bread, and perhaps adding some meat would be a good idea, but he is very distressed that he can only sell black bread. Please help him realize the development of a new kind of bread. Reward, shipwreck treasure. Shipwreck treasure? List's eyes shone. When he saw the word treasure, he couldn't help but feel excited. What could be more exciting than finding a treasure and obtaining an unexpected windfall? The mission must be completed. Rainer wants to make a new kind of bread. Adding some meat? Is he going to invent meat floss bread? The cooking industry in this world was still stuck in a very primitive state of food processing. Barbecued meat, grilled fish, boiled eggs, boiled meat, fried steak, cold salad. Sauce was invented, and people liked to put some sauce on everything they ate. Milk was limited to making cheese and pudding, and people liked to stuff minced meat into it. The most frightening thing was that people liked to add intact ingredients to the paste and roast them. They called it pie. Mrs. Abby used to be very good at a kind of food called shiitake pie. The specific method was to mix flour, sugar, and oil into a paste, then sprinkle the whole shiitake mushroom into the paste and put into the oven to roast. Thus, a shiitake pie was ready. List really couldn't get used to eating this pie. He always felt that it was an insult to his taste buds, even his IQ. But many times he had to endure the devastation of this dark cuisine. He deeply regretted not going to New Oriental to learn how to cook. 800 stainless steel beds, 200 people. Bread was the staple food of another world. From the king to the serfs, everyone ate bread. It was just that the aristocrats ate white bread, while the poor ate black bread. The aristocrats certainly had their own requirements for food. Unfortunately, the talent of the chefs was limited. After so many years, white bread was still white bread, and black bread was still black bread. How do you make meat floss bread? List recalled the meat floss bread he had eaten. It seems that you sprinkle some meat floss on top of the bread. But how do you make meat floss? He couldn't figure it out. He quickly put away his thoughts, gave a few instructions to the fruit farmers, mounted his horse, and left the oyster settlement. The retainer knight had already gone to inform Gort. List didn't need to worry about the protection of the fragrant coconut tree's cordyceps. He was ready to set off for the town's bakery to inspect the lives of the commoners. The bakery was located in the most conspicuous location in the town. It was a rare two-story wooden building. Bread was sold on the first floor, while the baker's family lived on the second floor. The bakery mainly offered two kinds of services. One was to sell all kinds of black bread, and the other was to bake bread. Not all serfs could afford to buy black bread. Most of them used the bakery's oven to bake the black bread with their own bran and other materials. Raynal was a freedman, as well as the town's wealthiest freedman. Reportedly, his family property was worth as much as 5 gold coins. He was fully deserving of being the flower town's richest man. However, there were also people who said that the old drunkard was the richest man. He had sold his blacksmith shop to the lord for 3 gold coins, despite his good wine, but his blacksmithing skills still brought the old drunkard a lot of wealth. At this time, Raynal was guarding the oven, waiting for a new batch of bread to come out of the oven. However, he was a bit distracted. He was one of the few people in the town who could regularly taste white bread. A few days ago, the caravan had brought milk bread. He had bought a bit and tasted a different and wonderful taste. It also made him understand that bread could be made to taste better. Can I make better bread? In the past, he wouldn't have even thought about it, because even if he could make it, no one in the town could afford it. But now was different. The road to the Thorns Ridge had been opened. The castle's caravan would go out to trade practically every 3 days. He could go with the caravan and sell his bread outside. It would be fine as long as he could go to the North Valley City, where many aristocrats lived. Moreover, I can also sell it to Sir Lord. Raynor recalled the day the caravan arrived. When he met Mrs. Abbey, he chatted with her and learned that she could only make the simplest white bread. Sir Lord should be tired of the monotonous white bread. Most of the caravan's milk bread has been bought by the castle. At this moment, Chapter 100. Inside the bakery, Liz saw the fair and plump Raynor. He didn't show much concern for his subjects, nor did he show a kind and amiable demeanor. He went straight to the point. Raynor, how long have you been making bread? I started making bread when I arrived at the flower farm, Sir Lord. I've been making bread for 18 years, said Raynor respectfully. My mother used to be a kitchen maid in Tulip Castle. She taught me how to make bread. When Sir Count opened the flower farm in Flower Town, I followed him. The history of Coral Island's development could no longer be verified. It was said that before the Grand Duke came overseas to establish a nation, Coral Island was already inhabited by humans. Later, Sapphire Grand Duke declared Coral Island to be owned by the kingdom and sent officials to govern it. It was already 20 years ago when Lee William Tulip was conferred the title of Earl of Coral Island due to his military exploits. At that time, Levis was just 2 years old and Lavera and List had not yet been born. In those years, the Count bought serfs wantonly to enrich Coral Island and reclaim the wasteland. 18 years ago, a new tulip was discovered in Flower Town, for which the Count reclaimed the flower farm. At its peak, tulip reached 200 mu, and the small castle was built at that time. The following year, 17 years ago, as more and more serfs gathered on the flower farm, Flower Town was built. Raynor went from being a baker who made bread for the flower farm to being a baker in a small town and settled down there. Life in the small town was hard, but Raynor quite enjoyed it. In a flash, 18 years passed. He had become the richest commoner in Flower Town. List then asked, "Have you been making black bread?" "I occasionally make some white bread, especially on New Year's Day. Also, when commoners get married, they will order a little white bread from me." "How is your white bread craftsmanship?" I don't know, Sir Lord. But Mrs. Abbey of the castle has tasted my white bread, and she says it tastes very good." Next to him, Raynor's wife suddenly interjected. "Sir Lord, Mrs. Abbey also said that she wants to study milk bread with Raynor. She said that Sir Lord likes it very much." "Sir Lord didn't ask you anything. Who allowed you to speak?" Raynor glared at his wife before hurriedly apologizing. "I'm sorry, Sir Lord. Rebecca is a foolish woman. She has offended your dignity, Sir Lord." List didn't mind. He was not a prickly nobleman who could not take the slightest offense. Besides, he did not feel that Rebecca's interjection was an offense. On the contrary, he was very happy that Abby was cooperating with Rainier to make milk bread. He was supportive of food research, so he said with a smile, "Raynor, the castle needs bread with a better texture. Since you have communicated with Mrs. Abbey, then very well, create more bread with different tastes. Don't be afraid of not being able to sell it. As long as it tastes good, the castle will purchase it in large quantities." Raynor was overjoyed. This was exactly what he wanted. He accepted the order on the spot and said, "Sir Lord, please rest assured, Raynor and Mrs. Abbey will definitely study milk bread and more new types of bread with a wonderful taste. I look forward to it." List got up and added, "I like to add a little meat to bread, but the roasted meat is too dry and hard to match with bread. Perhaps you could try to make the meat very soft, like mixing it with bread. Perhaps it will taste good." Raynor will remember. It was estimated that Raynor and Abbey would have to study for at least 10 days to half a month before they could make meat floss bread or some other new type of bread. At least, before List attended Levis's birthday party, he would not be able to complete this task. Soon, it would be August 16th. There were only 3 days left before Levis's birthday. After his birthday, Levis would be 23 years old. At his age, the Count and Melissa had already given birth to him. However, Levis had not found a suitable marriage partner and remained single. Lord Knight Loudon sent Levis's birthday invitation from Tulip Castle. After receiving the invitation, the butler Carter began to get busy preparing the gift. "Master, are we really only going to use seafood as a birthday gift?" he asked with some uncertainty. List had told him to just send some seafood as a gift. However, seafood was the cheapest food in the flour town, even cheaper than rye bread. It was everywhere on the East Coast. Not only fishermen, but even serfs would pick up some shells to eat. List read the book without raising his head. "Mr. Carter, apart from seafood, what other specialties of the flour town are worth bringing out?" This rhetorical question left Carter speechless. The remote town really did not have any praiseworthy specialties. He still tried his best to think. "Master, perhaps we can send some of the Thorns Ridge's wild fruits." No. I have been poisoned by eating wild fruits. Although I have already distinguished the types of wild fruits, but there are still risks. Apologies, Master, I was rash. This is nothing. After all, the castle picks a lot of wild fruits every day. We are already used to it. I just feel that sending wild fruits is not a good sign. It was because of wild fruits that List had occupied his predecessor's body and memories. Of course, he would not disregard wild fruits. He had ordered people to pick and experiment on all the wild fruits in the Thorns Ridge. In the end, he found 2 types of poisonous fruits. One of them was the black date fruit that had poisoned his predecessor. The black date fruit was the size of a fist and was slightly purplish-black in color. The other wild fruits were edible. However, there was no guarantee that there were no poisonous wild fruits in the depths of the Thorns Ridge. The wild fruits were picked by the bold serfs from the fruit trees at the edge of the Thorns Ridge. There are also some fruit trees in the small town, but not many, and only a few fruits could be born. List had already ordered people to collect the seeds of all kinds of wild fruits, preparing to plant them in batches at the beginning of next spring. Unfortunately, there was no guarantee that they would germinate. Without spriteworms, the growth of wild fruit trees was bound to be a difficult process. It was not that the serfs had not thought of planting them, but that they could not survive. For the time being, the castle's wild fruits could only be picked from the Thorns Ridge. Rejected as a birthday gift, Carter did not know what gift he should send that was more suitable than seafood. Unexpectedly, List remembered that ordinary wild fruits from the Thorns Ridge were not suitable to send, but there were still many fragrant coconuts on the East Coast. Calculating the time, a batch of fragrant coconuts should have matured. "Mr. Carter, contact the fruit farmers and have them pick a bag of fragrant coconuts. Match the fragrant coconuts with seafood as a gift." "Yes, Master." August 19th. Early in the morning, List put on his leather armor and the red blood sword. When the sun had just risen, he set off with his retainer knight, welcoming the warm wind. Chapter 101. Walking on the main road of the Thorns Ridge. List was still very satisfied. When he first came here, this road made him panic, and he was constantly worried that World of Warcraft would suddenly appear. Now that he had a wide field of vision, he wasn't the slightest bit worried about World of Warcraft's invasion. The original dirt road had also taken on a brand new look, turning into a gravel road, although it was still bumpy. Marcus was riding the already pregnant yellow-gray horse, half a body's length behind List's black dragon. He was fully armed and fearless of the weather, which had already begun to heat up. He was not only a tutor who taught List knight lessons, but also a knight who was ordered by the Count to protect List. In some countries, such a knight was called Chief Knight, but the Grand Duchy did not implement this system. Behind List and Marcus was Karl Hammerstein, the town's defense officer. He didn't need to come, but he still volunteered to protect List. Perhaps he just wanted to take this opportunity to go to Coral City to see the scenery, as well as to show his loyalty. Next to Karl were Philip Wool and Xavier Oxdown. These 2 young retainer knight were quite talented and were the first in the squad to cultivate chi. Behind them was Rome Winesong, who had also successfully cultivated qi the day before yesterday. As one of the first 4 retainers to serve as List's retainers, Rome worked hard and finally made progress. List immediately appointed him as the patrol captain to assist Karl in managing the patrol. Unfortunately, the other 2 of the 4 retainers, Gray Sickle and Auden Shoe Shop, still hadn't cultivated their qi. Marcus had given up on teaching them. Their talent was too poor, and they had missed their teenage years, so there was no hope. List had them serve as official assistants, one to assist the legal officer, Blair, and the other to assist the financial officer, Isaiah. To his own people, List was still sentimental and gave them a good status. At the end of the team were 4 young Night Knights. They were second only to Philip and Xavier in the Night Squad. They were also transferred to List's side as Retainer Knight. As for the other members of the Night Squad, they were still diligently training in the small town. There was also his valet, Thomas. The entire team consisted of 11 people and 11 horses. The hooves of the horses galloped, stirring up waves of sand and dust. As there were many pregnant Mares in the team, they did not move too fast. However, they still arrived at the Tulip Castle surrounded by a sea of tulip flowers at around 10:30 a.m. "Oh, my dear brother, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Levis was wearing a festive costume with a noble smile on his face. He opened his arms wide and welcomed List. It was a very warm, welcoming etiquette. List dismounted from the horse and also opened his arms wide to hug Levis. "Dear brother, happy birthday. Thank you for your blessing." List waved to Thomas and the retainer knight behind him. "Bring the gifts I prepared." The gifts were presented and handed to Silva, the deputy steward behind Levis. "What is it?" "It's a very big bag. It seems you spent a lot." Levis let the valet open it. According to the custom here, gifts had to be opened in person. The gifts in the bag were beautifully wrapped. First, there were coconuts the size of large bowls, wrapped in strips of cloth. They looked very classy, and the faint fragrance of coconut milk hit their nostrils. This is the fragrant coconut. The coconut milk inside is very fragrant and sweet. Open it and have a sip. Then you'll know how sweet and delicious it is. List said exaggeratedly. In fact, it was only slightly better than the ordinary coconut milk on Earth. However, the fruit that could be drunk directly was unique. Sure enough, Levis became curious. "Coconut milk? Is this fruit filled with milk?" "Yes, it's amazing. I can't wait to taste it." Levis turned to look at the other side of the bag. It was all wrapped in small bags. "What are these?" "It's seafood." "Seafood?" "Brother, don't think that they are ordinary. These seafood are the most precious seafood that fishermen catch, especially the older oysters." Saying this, List moved closer to Levis's ear. "It can let you not sleep at night and let you do what you want to do." Levis's eyes lit up. "Really? This is too precious. Thank you, List, my dear brother. This is the best birthday gift I received." He was not married yet, but who said that unmarried nobles could not have a bunch of mistresses? After receiving the gifts, the 2 brothers walked into the castle side by side. The hall of the castle was already crowded with nobles, big and small. Apart from the 2 viscounts who sent their sons, the other baron and lord, knight were present in person. After all, Levis was the heir of Coral Island, the future Earl of Coral Island, and the next lord they would follow. "It's very lively." List had to put on a standard aristocratic smile and greet the aristocrats who came to the birthday party. He did not like this kind of mass communication. However, as a member of the aristocracy, such occasions were indispensable if he wanted to maintain the dignity of an aristocrat. After a round of greetings, he was going to pay a visit to the Count. But after asking Levis, he learned that the Count had already left Coral Island. The Grand Duke's messenger brought an order. "All the direct feudal lords will go to Blue Dragon Island to discuss this year's development order. In fact, I'm already training orders of chivalry, ready to follow my father to the continent at any time." The development order was the most popular order of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The order was very simple. It was to respond to the call of the King of Iron and Steel Ridge to go to the continent and plunder wealth especially mines, gold, silver, copper, iron, aluminum, and all kinds of gems were the targets of contention. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and the Eagle Kingdom were enemies, and both countries had slaughtered each other's dragons. Therefore, a large-scale war broke out almost every year to plunder each other's mines. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was a vassal state of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. It was not strong, but it was very threatening to harass by sea. In the past, the Count had penetrated deep into the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom, seized an iron mine in one fell swoop, and plundered at least 200,000 tons of iron ore. It was said that at that time, the ships pulling iron ore were densely packed, like ants moving house. Such a heavy loss. The king of the Eagle Kingdom was furious and sent a dragon knight to intercept the fleet, but was blocked by the dragon knight of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. It was also in that battle that Marquis Merlin Lontaro, the captain of the palace fleet, saw the potential of Lee William and married his daughter Melissa to him. Liszt had heard this story since he was a child. Every time at a banquet, the nobles would recall the past, and they would always mention this story to flatter the count. Unfortunately, since that battle, the Eagle Kingdom had paid more attention to the protection of the coastline, and there was no chance to achieve such a brilliant record. Every year, a batch of knight's blood was sacrificed, but only a small amount of metal and gem mines could be exchanged. "Brother, are you also going to the battlefield?" Liszt was a little surprised. "Yes, I'm already 23 years old. Although I'm not married yet, I'm old enough. If I don't go to the battlefield, it will be a stain on my record." Liszt shook his head and pretended to be regretful. "I don't have a qualified knight team, and I don't even have the opportunity to go to the battlefield. I really want to fight side by side with my brother and win the glory of the knight." In fact, he did not want to go to the battlefield. Chapter 103. Liszt, do you see that? I planted 10 acres of black tulip. Sweet Fragrance, the great elf, flew in the sea of tulip flowers. Behind her was a patch of tulip that had not yet bloomed. The rows of tulip under the glaring sun were a little scratchy. At noon, not only would people be listless, but so would plants. Only the elves were still so carefree and energetic. Wow, wow. The two little elves followed behind Sweet Fragrance, their mouths shouting some meaningless sounds. Elves were not social creatures, but elves of the same species could play together and share the different species of plants they had mastered with each other. These two tulip elves were Sweet Fragrance's attendants. Tulip Castle had always hoped that these two little elves could break through the shackles and evolve into new great elves. Planted at the end of June, they've already budded in less than 2 months. Liszt strolled between the fields, looking at the budding black tulip with excitement. In about a month, these tulip would turn into gold coins and flow into his pocket. Sweet Fragrance raised her beautiful head and said proudly, "Of course, these are the tulip I planted, and every seed has germinated under my care." That expression was clearly saying, "Come and praise me." Liszt smiled and praised, "Sweet Fragrance is amazing." I am amazing." Sweet Fragrance did 2 somersaults in the air. Wow, wow. The two little elves imitated Sweet Fragrance's movements and also somersaulted in the air. "Liszt, these black tulip are growing very well. Their magic content is also abundant, and there are no obvious attributes. Compared to the 2 potions Tulip Castle has mastered, they are better, and mages have already come to place orders." Levis' tutor, Frank, accompanied Liszt. "It will become the new pillar of Tulip Castle and make the family stronger. Brother will rely on it to continue father's footsteps and become a Sky Knight." "I wholeheartedly agree with your words. Levis is extremely talented. There is no doubt that he will become a Sky Knight." At this time, Xianxia had already been playing around for a while. She flew in front of Liszt and said with a smile, "I will help Levis break through. When the time comes, I will take him flying, just like how I took you guys flying when you were young." When Liszt and the others were young, Xianxia loved to grab them and fly into the sky. She watched as the little children screamed in fear. However, once they got used to the high altitude and stopped crying, Xianxia was no longer interested in bringing them along. an elf with a wicked sense of humor. List thought of these scenes and felt very warm. Xianxia loved to play around, but it had no intention of harming them. Because of the contract, it was very close to the Tulip family's bloodline. It will be memorable. It will be best if you can scare Levis to tears again. Xianxia Bela said regretfully, I can't scare Levis to tears now. When he becomes a Sky Knight, it will be even more difficult to scare him to tears. At that time, he will already be able to conquer the sky. The reason why a Sky Knight was called a Sky Knight was because they had already mastered high-level battle energy. When battle energy was released, they could fly in the air for a short period of time. Although they could not fly freely like birds, the short leap was enough to ensure that they could quickly attack anyone or anything within a few hundred meters of them. After visiting the Black Tulip field, Levis had already sent most of the nobles away. Those who stayed were on good terms with him. List was also preparing to leave. He did not intend to spend the night in Tulip Castle, so he directly called Levis to the study to discuss some matters. List, can't we talk about it at night? There are still many people in the living room that I need to entertain. Brother, I don't intend to stay here for the night. After discussing things with you, I will go back. So urgent? There are many things in town waiting for me to deal with. All right, what do you want to talk to me about? Teacher Frank has already brought you to see the Black Tulip plantation. The slave trading fleet will have to wait at least more than a month before they can return. I'm not talking about this. I have something else to talk to you about. Liz wanted to talk about seafood, but it did not feel very impactful to say it directly. He had to first lay the groundwork and whet Levis's appetite before discussing seafood as a shareholder. After thinking for a while, he said, I have mastered a new magic potion. What? Levis was shocked. You have a new tulip magic potion? Not tulip, it's a mushroom, a flame mushroom, a magic potion mushroom. List was very satisfied with Levis's expression. Do you need a cooperation, my dear brother? Cooperation? We are blood brothers, the best cooperation partners, isn't it? Of course. Then how do you intend to cooperate? Are you still following the Black Tulip model? Are you going to cooperate with me personally? I don't like to give benefits to Madame Marie and Lytton. Therefore, I will still cooperate with you, brother. However, this time, I am only going to sell the finished flame mushrooms to you. You will be the seller of the flame mushrooms and will not be involved in the cultivation of the flame mushrooms. List stated the cooperation plan that he had thought of. He wanted to make the flame mushrooms a specialty of the flower town and did not intend to directly sell the cultivation technique. This is not appropriate. How many flame mushrooms can be grown in the flower town? Sell me the cultivation technique. I will produce them, and a share of the sales would be great. I am in urgent need of gold coins to buy serfs. Otherwise, a share of the sales would also be acceptable. If you can directly give me 5,000 gold coins, then I can even directly sell you the cultivation technique of the flame mushrooms without any subsequent share. You only need to help me sell the flame mushrooms I produce in the future. 5,000 gold coins. Levis sighed. I can't even take out 1,000 gold coins. Forget it. Let's directly sell the finished product. Without haggling too much, the cooperation was thus reached. Soon after, Liz said, Brother, have you found a saltpeter mine? No, I have searched all the cities, yet no one has found similar ores. You really are a lucky guy. Why do you always run into good things? Maybe good things come to good people. By the way, brother, I still have a business that I want to cooperate with you. Levis's eyes shone. What business? His younger brother, who had suddenly become mature, had already brought him too many surprises. Just the black tulip and the flame mushrooms alone were equivalent to increasing his chances of promoting to a Sky Knight by 20%. This made him full of confidence in being a medicine pot. Seafood business. I have already prepared to station caravans in all the cities of the Coral Island to sell seafood. However, seafood fishing is not a technical job. There will always be people who will jump out and compete with me for the hard-earned money. Therefore, I intend to give you 20% of the shares in exchange for you to help me get a permit to sell seafood on the Coral Island. He wanted to monopolize the seafood business and legalize it, directly cutting off the possibility of other people's business. The seafood market is not small. I heard that you can now earn several gold coins a day. Levis said carelessly. I don't know where brother heard that, but I can't even earn a single gold coin a day. Maybe later, when I start selling it in all the cities, I can earn 2 gold coins a day. List first complained about being poor, then threatened. If you don't help me, I will ask father to help me get one. I just want to earn a bit of hard-earned money to buy white bread to eat. That's all, brother. Perhaps the Count really did not like List. However, if List really begged, the Count should not refuse. After all, this business was opened up by List. All right, but I want 30% of the shares. The decree will be issued tomorrow. When father left, he asked me to temporarily take over the management of the Coral Island. Levis took a puff from his cigar and said with a beaming smile, "Agreed." List inwardly despised him, but on the surface he said, "All right, 30% it is." Chapter 104. What is this? Levis picked up the black pearl and weighed it in his hand. Does it have magic power? It feels like it has water attribute magic power. It does indeed have magic power. It is a pearl. Pearl. Levis shook his head. Don't think that I have never seen pearls. The pearl ornaments that I have given out are not few in number. I once took a boat tour on the Blue Dragon Island's tranquil lake and even dug out pearls from pearl oysters. They were white and not this big. This is a black pearl dug out from another kind of giant clam. Giant clam? Is it produced in the Flower Town? Levis caught the point. The Flower Town's production was too rich. In fact, the waves brought the corpse of a huge squid. There was a giant clam inside the corpse, and a black pearl was dug out from the giant clam. Brother, regardless of whether it is a pearl or not, what do you think of its value? Water attribute magic power treasures are more precious than white pearls. Are you going to give it to me? Don't be so greedy. I've already given you a birthday present. This black pearl is a treasure that I carry with me. It can help me calm my restless emotions. The effect is dozens of times better than that of white pearls. I would like to ask you if you're interested in buying it. After all, I have fire attribute chi, while you have water attribute chi. That is true. Compared to white pearls, the black pearl gives me a more comfortable feeling. How many gold coins are you going to sell it for? On the market, white pearls of the same size are worth about a few gold coins. I will buy it for 10 gold coins. How about it? 10 is too little. It is not little, List. No matter how much it calms down, it is just an ornament. Perhaps wizards can forge it into magic equipment. It has excellent magic power storage, suitable for forging magic equipment. There are no wizards in my Flower Town, but I believe that you, brother, must have some connection with wizards. Why not ask a wizard to help you forge a magic equipment? Levis shook his head. If it had more magic power, then it could indeed be forged into magic equipment. However, it does not have enough magic power, so it would be difficult to forge a useful magic equipment. Cough, cough. In fact, List then revealed his true purpose. He drew a circle with his hand, which was the size of a big bowl. I also have a black pearl of this size. It contains rich magic power and is absolutely suitable for making magic equipment. Water attribute magic power is naturally suitable for you, brother. A bigger black pearl? So big. Levis was no longer calm. Although fist-sized black pearls were rare, they were at most an interesting accessory. Bowl-sized black pearls, on the other hand, were different. If he really had such a large black pearl, coupled with the dense mana, it would definitely be a good material for mana equipment. Those mages would spend a lot of money to buy it for research, just because of its rarity. 500 gold coins. I'll sell you the black pearl. I want to take a look at the black pearl. First, List called his valet, Thomas, and asked him to fetch the bowl-sized black pearls for Marcus. A moment later, a slightly irregularly shaped, gigantic black pearl appeared on the table in the study. Rubbing the huge black pearl, Levis's eyes kept glowing. Compared with the inexperienced List, he knew the value of this treasure better, so he gave his offer. I'll buy it for 100 gold coins. This is a novelty. Although it is rich in magic power, there is no guarantee that it really has development value. I can't risk buying something that can't be used. What he said made sense. List wasn't sure if the Black Pearl could really forge magic equipment, but bargaining was still necessary. After several back and forth, the Black Pearl was finally sold for 280 gold coins. In addition, the fist-sized Black Pearl in his hand was also included in the transaction as an accessory. After the transaction, List smiled and said, "Brother, let me know when you're done with the magic equipment. I want to see what it's used for." This is also the first time I've come in contact with Black Pearls. After determining the use of the Black Pearls, the real value of the remaining ones could be calculated. No problem. Just as he was about to leave the study, Liz suddenly remembered something and asked, "By the way, brother, has Tulip Castle bought any new books recently?" "No. Since when did you like reading so much?" "I'd rather drink until dawn than stay in the study and read those dazzling words. There's a lot of interesting knowledge hidden in the books." "Knowledge?" Levis laughed. "List, do you want to change careers and become a mage?" "That's not a good idea. I often deal with those mages. They're all eccentric lunatics who talk about knowledge and exploration. The glory of night is always won on horseback." List walked quickly out of the study. There was a house of gold and books, and there was a beauty in books. As a cultured man, he didn't want to lower himself to the same level as the other party. The cooperation had been confirmed. List said goodbye to Levis and left Tulip Castle. However, he did not go back directly. Instead, he walked along the path to an independent castle next to Coral City. It was Madame Penelope's residence. Since he had come to Coral City, he had to see his grandmother. The castle was covered with creepers. It added a lot of ancient aura to the castle, as well as a bit of inexplicable gloom. There was a platform on the second floor of the castle, which was covered with flowers and plants. Madame Penelope's life, apart from aristocratic socializing, was mostly spent on these flowers and plants. While watering the flowers, she chatted, "You came out of the castle so soon. Didn't Levis ask you to stay for dinner to continue the celebration?" "I refused. There are still many things in Flower Town that I cannot do without." A qualified lord always keeps himself busy. As long as people are busy, they will feel fulfilled and effectively prevent their life from degenerating. Your father has been busy all day at your grandfather's side since he was a child. That is why he could become a count before the age of 30. Madame Penelope turned around and continued watering the flowers. Unfortunately, ever since he married 2 troublesome daughters-in-law, he hasn't been able to go any further. I really hope that your brother can sober up a bit, but that little guy is also a fool. The youngest daughter of Marquis Roderick is a troublesome person. Marquis Roderick, one of the Grand Duchy's 7 marquises, served in the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry and was the vice commander. No wonder Levis was still unmarried. It turned out that he had taken a fancy to the Marquis daughter. Cousin Meopel is deeply in love with the little princess, while elder brother is in love with Marquis Roderick's daughter. It seems that both of them have their own ideas. The same goes for you. Me? Don't think that just because I am old, I won't be able to hear news about you, Athena Salmon, right? I heard from Vera that it is a very lovely little girl who admires you endlessly, yet you actually refused her. She is the daughter of a viscount. Although fish sellers are rather vulgar, but with gold coins, you can still eat white bread, right? List didn't want to say anything more. Madame Penelope continued to ramble on about young people are insensible and the like. But soon, she turned her attention to her pot of flowers. Chapter 105. Black nightshade was said to be a close relative of eggplant, a plant that bore small black berries, the fruit of which was very tasty. When he was young, there were a lot of wild black nightshades growing in the fields, which List liked to eat very much. He didn't know if the black nightshade in Madame Penelope's flower pot was a species he was familiar with. But when he heard that the plant was sick, he immediately stepped forward out of habit, unleashed magic eyes, and took a look at the dying black nightshade. When he glanced at it, he seemed to see a faint flow of magic power, but it was just a flash before quickly disappearing. He was pleasantly surprised. Magic power meant that this black nightshade was unusual. It isn't going to breed another sprite worm, right? Although List was excited, he didn't show it on the surface. He just continued to size up the black nightshade. The black nightshade was already on the verge of death. Its leaves were yellow, its rhizome was covered with black spots, and there were a few flower buds on the verge of withering. But when he scanned it with magic eyes, he quickly found that the flow of magic power was very weak, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Without careful observation, he simply couldn't detect any traces of magic power. He was clear, it is unlikely to be a magic ingredient. It is most likely that the black nightshade is going to breed a sprite worm. Poor black nightshade, I don't know what kind of disease it has contracted. It has already been a week, but it still hasn't come back to life. Watching it wither day by day, just like me, it's really hard to bear. Madame Penelope was still nagging as she sprayed the black nightshade with water. Grandmother, you are very healthy, showing no signs of aging. Liz said, pretending to be relaxed, since you feel sad when you look at the black nightshade, you might as well give it to me to raise. Perhaps the Flower Town's climate can revive it. If not, then I will give you a new pot of black nightshade. I am very happy that you think so. List, take care of it. Of course. With ease, a pot of black nightshade, which was suspected to be breeding a sprite worm, was handed over to List. In a hurry to take care of the black nightshade, List quickly took his leave, rendezvoused with his retainer knight, and hurried back to the Flower Town. When he arrived at the Flower Town, it was already sunset in the afternoon. The red glow of the sunset rippled on the horizon. The morning glow did not leave the house, but the sunset glow traveled 1,000 miles. Tomorrow would be another bright and sunny day. List didn't take a break and directly ordered Gort, Teacher Gort, mobilize all the serfs to look for black nightshade. Dig them up and send them to the stud farm. Remember, it's best to dig up the roots along with the soil. Don't damage the black nightshade's roots. Taking advantage of the fact that it wasn't dark yet, he quickly found a few wild black nightshades near the stud farm. Then he moved the sick black nightshade out of the pot and planted it next to the wild black nightshade. He also ordered people to fetch some compost and watered it near the roots of the black nightshade. One by one, the wild black nightshade was dug up and planted around the diseased black nightshade, forming a small black nightshade field. My lord, all of the nightshades that could be found before nightfall are here. Now that the sun has set, the serfs won't be able to find the black nightshade. I'll have the serfs continue to search for it tomorrow. Sure. Candles and lanterns shone. Gort looked at the black nightshade field and asked curiously, what's the use of these black nightshades? Many people knew that black nightshade's berries were edible, but the fruit was too small and the output was too low, so it didn't have much value. Therefore, no one planted them. Most of them grew wild in the fields. Generally, only children like to rummage through the black nightshade berries. It may be useful, but I can't be sure for the time being. But in any case, transplant all of the black nightshades that can be found here tomorrow. As you wish. Back in the castle, waiting for dinner, List leaned on a chair in the living room, opened a fragrant coconut, drank the coconut milk, and relaxed his body. Although the Earth Knight had a strong physique, he still felt a little tired after riding a horse all day. However, he was in a good mood and was a little excited. The worries about the seafood market were solved. Later on, just by selling seafood on the Coral Island, he could live a luxurious, aristocratic life. The sales channel for the flame mushrooms had been arranged, and now he just had to wait for the serfs to solve the planting technique. The black tulips were still a month away from the harvest season. The 280 gold coins from the sale of the black pearls had solved the castle's tight financial situation. He was going to buy a few more horses and carriages and expand his caravan. He would strive to expand the seafood business to every small town and reach a scale of 3 gold coins or more per day. Of course, these were the established directions. What really excited him was the black nightshade sprite worm. In addition to the enfeoffment gift, the Count gave him 4 sprite worms, and the Count rewarded him with another sprite worm for discovering the black tulip. The remaining peanut sprite worm, tomato sprite worm, and fragrant coconut sprite worm were all discovered through the smoke missions. Only the black nightshade sprite worm that might exist was personally discovered by him, which gave him a sense of accomplishment. It turned out that even without relying on the smoke missions, he could still obtain his own opportunities. However, it seemed that without magic eyes, it would be very difficult for him to discover the secret of the Black Nightshade. Magic eyes, on the other hand, were brought to him by the smoke missions. In the end, it seemed that he had borrowed the light of the smoke missions. In any case, this is a good omen. Perhaps in the future, I can often use magic eyes to look for sprite worms that might be hidden on any plant. In his original understanding, sprite worms were very rare. The tulip family had cultivated on the coral island for 20 years and had only obtained a little more than 100 sprite worms, which was a very low probability. However, in a small place like the Flower Town, in just half a year, he had already discovered 3 sprite worms. On a trip outside, he had also abducted a black nightshade sprite worm. This could no longer be described as good luck. It can be roughly determined that the probability of sprite worms being conceived is not low. However, due to environmental factors, a large number of sprite worms might have miscarried. There were no smoke missions. The peanut sprite worm had died long ago, and the helpless serfs could not provide the peanut sprite worm with the nutrients it needed. The tomato sprite worm might be conceived, but there was also the possibility that John Shoulderpole would directly pluck the largest tomato and eat the unborn sprite worm. The fragrant coconut sprite worm was hard to say, but with its high position and the threat of the fruit-stealing monkeys, it might also die. As for the current black nightshade sprite worm, without magic eyes to find traces of it, it was doomed to die, unable to be born. Now that I have the smoke missions and magic eyes, the sprite worms that I can find will definitely pour in. With these sprite worms, it is inevitable that I will make a fortune from farming. After the banquet, List summoned the 3 people in charge of the caravan to the castle. He told them about the seafood trade. Coral City, Biwa City, North Valley City, Yulin City, Snake Spear City, and Gravel City. Among the 6 cities of the Coral Island, 5 had already opened trade routes. Only Gravel City was too far away, making it difficult to trade. The Flower Town was at the northeasternmost end of the island, while Gravel City was at the southwesternmost end of the island, separated by more than 100 kilometers. Tomorrow, Tulip Castle will issue a seafood sales decree, which can only be obtained by the Flower Town. List put his hands behind his back and looked at the night view outside the window. There were still few lights in the Flower Town at night. Against the dark background, the stars were especially bright and sparkling. A faintly discernible Milky Way could be seen running through the sky. This probably indicated that this different world still belonged to the Milky Way. Chapter 106. The East Coast was only a few kilometers in length. Although there was a lot of seafood, but due to overfishing, it wouldn't take long before the seafood was completely harvested. List was not willing to do something like draining the pond to catch the fish. He was going to implement a fishing moratorium in the Flower Town, or at least a summer moratorium. In other words, during the breeding and growth season of the dog days, the fish resources in the sea would be well protected. Of course, the summer moratorium was only a temporary measure. After the Thorns Ridge was conquered and the wharf was built at Deepwater Bay, he would promote offshore fishing. The shellfish resources at the coast were too little, so he had to protect them. However, the fishery resources at the coast were definitely enough for the entire Coral Island. Currently, there was no wharf, no fishing boats, and no fishermen. He could only develop the coastal fishery. Isaiah, I leave the supervision of the establishment of the Coral City's fishing team to you. I hope that it will be ready as soon as possible. Old Granddad will assist you from the side in selecting the person in charge of the maintenance of the trade routes. Spread them out as soon as possible. I will provide 50 gold coins for the rental of warehouses and the purchase of carriages and horses. Yes, Sir Baron. Isaiah accepted the order. Soon, the caravan's construction plan was discussed. It was divided into 2 parts. One part was to establish the Flower Caravan, which would be stationed in the Coral City, with Old Granddad as the caravan captain and Harpagon as the vice captain. Old Granddad mainly operated the Coral City White Birch City trade route, the Coral City Elm City trade route, the Coral City Gravel City trade route, and the Coral City Snake Spear City trade route. Harpagon was in charge of the fishing team and the castle purchasing team. The purchasing team was to purchase whatever the castle needed and transport it back to the caravan. The other part was to establish the Thorns caravan, with Sherlock as the caravan captain. The caravan mainly operated the Flower Town North Valley City trade route. The two caravans focused on different things. One focused on the seafood business, providing gold coins for the Flower Town, while the other focused on the daily trade, providing the Flower Town with various daily necessities. He got up early. He exercised and cultivated chi. List was not as diligent as when he was doing the archery mission. Leisure time always made people degenerate quietly, and aristocratic extravagance was wearing away at his fighting spirit. Dosen released the magic. When he came back from walking the dog, he watched as the servants broke the rock thorns and began to pave the road. He sighed in his heart. The life of fighting cocks and walking dogs is much more enjoyable. This Dosen Avenue was 60 meters long, and it would probably be completed by the end of the year. Eating well and training diligently. Although Dosen was not yet an adult flying dust dog, his body was already stronger than his mother's. His magic casting was fast and precise, and he executed List's commands meticulously. It was already a very good combat helper and a loyal guard. Gag. Gag. On the windowsill of the castle, ear-piercing screeches accompanied by a familiar melody welcomed List's return. It was Blessed Curls singing at the top of its lungs. This wind peregrine falcon's feathers were getting darker and darker, and its length was much longer than when it was still a fledgling. For this reason, List tied a rope around its ankles. He still hadn't figured out how to train Blessed Curls. It was very likely that he would directly kill it and eat its meat, so as to avoid any trouble. After tying up Dosen, List went to the black nightshade field. The wild black nightshade planted last night was a bit rusty and had yet to adapt well to the new soil environment. The black nightshade, which was very likely to give birth to a sprite worm, was even more sick than yesterday, and its aura was much weaker. It was on the verge of withering. He released magic eyes, carefully observed, and found that the black nightshade's bud was still faintly flickering with magic power. I hope it doesn't die, or else all this effort would have been in vain. Everything that could be done had been done, and the rest could only be left to fate. There were still many wild black nightshades in the small town, which were transplanted one by one. After a whole day, nearly all of the wild black nightshades in the small town were transplanted into the black nightshade field, covering an area of 1 mu. The serfs constantly watered, fertilized, and weeded, striving to use the most meticulous care to keep the black nightshades alive. Sir, you really should go to the Thorns wormstalk shrub and take a look. The thorns there have changed overnight, and they have already grown to half a person's height. Blair gestured with his hand, indicating the craziness of the fast-growing thorns. In just a few days, the thorn seedlings had immediately turned into thorns trees. But he was also a bit puzzled. But, sir, I can't think of any use for them. They don't bear fruit, and they can't be used as wood. Perhaps we can plant thorns on both sides of the road in the Thorns Ridge. That way, wild beasts and even World of Warcraft should take a detour, not daring to casually trample on them. There is indeed a use. Let's cultivate the shrub first. List also could not think of any good use. Soon after, he inspected the fragrant coconut worm stalk and the cultivation of the flame mushroom. The fragrant coconut worm stalk was still growing, and there was not much movement. The cultivation of the flame mushroom brought him a pleasant surprise. Your wisdom and insight are simply amazing. Sir, after your guidance, the shiitake settlement serfs planted the shiitake and the flame mushroom together, and the flame mushroom successfully grew. I can't figure it out, but the flame mushroom really needs to grow together with shiitake, said Gort excitedly, pointing at the flame mushroom, which had already begun to develop from mycelium to fruiting body. His subordinate's exclamation gave List a sense of accomplishment. He just smiled faintly. After finding the reason, the next step is to cultivate the flame mushroom on a large scale. Teacher Gort, the shiitake settlement must be expanded as much as possible. If the ingredients for cultivating the flame mushroom are not enough, then have the caravan purchase them from outside. He said in a heavy tone, I need magic ingredients. As you wish, I will squeeze every bit of the serf's physical strength to cultivate an adequate amount of flame mushrooms. Wonderful red mushrooms. They will bring unimaginable wealth to the flower town. Squeezing is a must, but the treatment cannot be lacking. Tell all the shiitake serfs that as long as they can cultivate enough flame mushrooms, then the accompanying shiitake will have their taxes reduced by half. Heavens, that bunch of lowly serfs will go crazy with joy. You are truly the embodiment of benevolence. Of course I am a benevolent lord. However, List's tone changed. You also have to tell those serfs that if any of them are lazy or careless and damage the flame mushrooms, I will let them understand that aristocrats are not only generous and benevolent, but also hold a whip that can tear people apart. Gort nodded. Of course, it is necessary to let them understand this. People were not machines. They were all uniformly diligent. There were always some people who were gluttonous and lazy. After barely getting by, they would not want to do any more work. List did not like such commoners. His way of thinking was already that of a qualified aristocrat. Looking at the Sir Lord's departing figure, Crooked Neck Bob was very disappointed. Analda's reward, heavens, it was actually obtained by that old bastard Nash. That old bachelor. How could he have cultivated the flame mushrooms before me? He cursed angrily. If it wasn't for List, he wouldn't have had the guts to do so. He was cursing at Nash. The reason was very simple. After the flame mushrooms were successfully cultivated, List rewarded them according to their contributions. Nash was the first to research the appropriate ingredients. Thereupon, List rewarded Nash with a gold coin. Everyone in the shiitake settlement was envious of Nash, especially Bob, who was determined to get the reward. After cursing for a moment, Chapter 107. Another day, the sun rose from the east. On the horse track, List shouted, multiple phantom arrows. The 6 arrows in front and behind issued a fierce air-piercing sound as they chased each other in the air. In an instant, they collided with each other, and then their trajectories became disorderly, not forming a formation. There were only 2 arrows stuck in the target 100 meters away. Failed. List shook his head. Of course, he failed again. His current level of archery was not good enough to display the profoundness of the multiple arrows, multiple phantom arrows. In addition, he had not touched the bow and arrow for several days, so his level even faintly regressed a little. The same was true for the cultivation of chi techniques. Fortunately, he was already very skilled in the most basic part of the multiple arrows, the dual arrows. It was enough for the Earth Knight to be able to effectively display the dual arrows on the battlefield. List glanced at the nearby Marcus who was drilling the Knight Squad. Just yesterday, another young member had cultivated chi and became his retainer knight. Of the 12 members, half had already become trainee knight with beginner chi. Once all of them had cultivated chi, it was time to set out to clear the Thorns Ridge. Before this winter, we must capture the Thorns Ridge. List did not disturb Marcus's teaching. He handed the equipment to the retainer knight and rode back to the castle. Take a bath. Prepare to eat breakfast. Butler Carter stood to the side and reported to him. Master, the town's baker Rayner and Mrs. Abbey have cooperated and have successfully made a new type of bread. Do you want to try it now? Is that so? The bread is ready. Hurry up and bring it. The new bread did not look like the meat floss bread he had imagined, but rather a round steamed bun shape with a cracked surface. Thick cream could be seen flowing in the cracks. What kind of bread is this? It doesn't have a name yet and is waiting for you to name it, Master. Mrs. Abbey said that it is made from flour, eggs, and cream. It is divided into 2 parts, the inside and the outside. The outer skin is a bit troublesome to make, but the cracks after baking are very beautiful. Carter explained the method of making the new bread in detail. Liz had already picked one up and taken a bite. The aroma of butter mixed with the aroma of bread and lingered in his mouth, stimulating his taste buds. It was much more delicious than plain white bread. This smell, this look, Liz said directly. Mr. Carter, tell Mrs. Abby and Rayner to call it a pineapple bun. Pineapple bun, one iconic name. In the future, I'll change my breakfast from white bread to pineapple buns. I don't have to change my lunch and dinner. Contact Sherlock, the Thorns Caravan, and Renault. Let's see if we can sell the pineapple buns in North Valley City. List instantly arranged the sales plan for the pineapple buns. After thinking for a moment, he continued. In addition, tell Rayner and Mrs. Abby that as a reward for inventing a new type of bread, 10 silver coins each. Also, if you have any ideas, continue to invent. The more flavors of bread, the better. He wanted to say that everyone would be rewarded with a gold coin. Recently, he had made a lot of money from selling black pearls. His wallet was bulging, and he was full of heroic spirit. However, the reward of gold coin was the same as the reward for discovering a sprite worm and cultivating a magic ingredient, which was too exaggerated. It was just bread to satisfy the appetite of the stomach. Nothing more. It was not worth too much reward. Therefore, it was changed to 10 silver coins. Carter left. He slowly tasted the pineapple bun, very satisfied that he was not being generous. Those who are not in charge do not know the price of firewood and rice. The Lord does not have any surplus food at home. Slowly, faint smoke floated before his eyes, twisting and squirming to form serpentines. Mission completed. Reward, treasure, shipwreck. After a while, the text dispersed, the smoke recondensed, and a new mission was issued. Mission: Costo has been distressed recently. Ever since he became the navigational teacher of the Night Squad, teaching has been difficult. The Night Squad disdains navigational knowledge. Please correct the youngster's attitude. Reward: Variant Thorns. The treasure shipwreck is finally in hand. The Night Squad is unwilling to learn navigational knowledge. It seems that there may be a certain connection between the mission reward and the new mission. Probably. Only Costo can discover the treasure shipwreck. He shook the bell and called the old butler, who had not gone far. My lord, send someone to bring Captain Costo here. I have something to ask him. Yes, my lord. About half an hour later, Costo arrived at the castle. My apologies, my lord. I was snorkeling at the beach and was delayed for a while. Snorkeling? I was practicing my swimming and underwater fighting skills. Although I'm not a knight, I still desire to fight. How is the Night Squad learning from you recently? This. Costo hesitated. Just say it. Your retainer Night Squad is very unfriendly towards the learning of navigational knowledge. They don't even like to learn how to swim, let alone teach them how to sail. They always say that a knight relies on a warhorse, not a sailboat. Moreover, Mr. Marcus takes up a lot of the Night Squad's time. List instantly understood. Although Marcus had been subdued by him and began to follow him loyally, he understood that the sea could also provide wealth. But deep down, he still worshipped the glory of a knight and the warhorse's charge. He felt that ships only needed to send them to fight on land, and there was no need to learn any navigational knowledge. So he transmitted his ideas to the retainer Night Squad and squeezed into Costo's teaching time. As for Marcus, Liz sighed slightly. It was easy to change a person's identity, but it was a bit difficult to change a person's ideas. Fortunately, he could use the Lord's dignity. He immediately summoned Marcus and the Night Squad and had them gather at the castle gate. List began to lecture. From today on, all of you will spend half a day learning navigational knowledge from Captain Costo. Within 3 days, you must learn how to swim. If you can't learn, 50 lashes. After a week, I will examine your navigational knowledge. If you can't answer a question, 10 lashes. The youngsters were hesitant to speak. List ignored them. He called Marcus into the study. Teacher Marcus, you should know why I'm looking for you, right? Marcus said solemnly, Sir, I don't think the Night Squad needs to be distracted by learning how to sail. We don't need to cross the ocean by ship and go to the continent. Let ordinary sailors operate the ship while we Night Squad focus on fighting. The Coral Island Orders of Chivalry also continue this method of fighting. His words had some truth to them. The Night Squad belonged to the army, but List asked them to become the Navy. Naturally, they were unwilling. However, List had his own ideas. How many of a Knight squad do you think can become an Earth Knight? Or when can they become Earth Knight? I think someone should be able to become an Earth Knight before the age of 20. Philip and Xavier are quite talented. Marcus replied, 2. I have painstakingly trained them, but I can only obtain 2 Earth Knight squads. Then, can they form a squad of Knight squads and go to the continent's battlefield? I am willing to fight to the death for Sir Ling. I appreciate your kindness, but this is impulsive stupidity. Flower Town is still developing. I have already purchased a large number of serfs. In the future, I will select enough outstanding youngsters to train. Now, what I need are instructors who have mastered all kinds of basic abilities, not good-for-nothings who are proficient in fighting. What do you mean? Teacher Marcus, some of these Knight squads will become the backbone of the Knight squad, while others will helm ships in the future and transport my Knight squad to the continent to compete for minerals. Divide the work and perform their respective duties. Do you understand? List's expression was indifferent, but his eyes were stern. Chapter 108. List simply punished Marcus by deducting his salary for a month. His main purpose was to help Costo complete the smoke mission. So he asked the members of the Knight Squad to learn how to swim in 3 days. To swim, they must go into the sea, which may bring them into contact with the shipwrecked treasure. He wanted to know what the shipwrecked treasure was as soon as possible. Was it full of gold coins or bright jewels? Or was there a dragon egg hidden there? But then again, is the dragon born from the dragon egg? In the Knight novel, there were many different opinions about the origin of the dragon, and there had been no accurate answer. He asked the Count, but the Count did not know where the dragon came from. This was an unsolved mystery. The Knight Squad soon began their swimming lessons. List did not go to patrol. It would not be too late to come back when there were clues about the shipwrecked treasure. He was going to the Thornsworm's worm stock bushes. The reward of the new mission was a mutant type of thorns. He wanted to check to see if he could get the reward in advance. The previous fast-growing type of thorns was not a magic ingredient. This time, the mutant type of thorns was likely to be a magic ingredient. There were large patches of thorns half the height of a person. But disappointingly, after casting Magic Eye, there was no trace of magic power. No magic ingredient. Maybe the mission has not been completed, so the magic ingredient has not successfully mutated? He called out the smoke mission and found that the mission had not been completed. In other words, the teenager's attitude had not been corrected. Ideological education is not enough. It seems that I have to go to the seaside and see who is still resisting sailing lessons. He turned to his valet, Thomas, and said, "Go back to the castle, get my whip, and then go to the seaside to find me." "Yes, master." Ideological education was not very effective just by talking about it. He must use the whip to let them achieve the unity of spirit and flesh and pain and remember the lesson. Crack, crack. With a gloomy face, List whipped the 2 young Knight boys who were afraid of the sea. The residents of a coastal island town were afraid of going into the water. Between the whip and the sea, the 2 young Knight boys finally chose the sea. Under Costo's guidance, they began to paddle like dogs. List summoned the smoke mission and finally saw a change. Mission complete. Reward: poisonous mutated fast-growing thorns. Mission: the newly rooted black nightshade doesn't seem to be able to adapt to the Flower Town soil. Although it is nutritious, but it is unable to absorb it very quickly. The magic power that was as gentle as water was draining away bit by bit. It might be dying soon. Please help it gather magic power. Reward: 1 sprite worm. Nightshade was included in the smoke mission. List was convinced that it was indeed giving birth to a sprite worm, but the problem was very serious. It is not acclimatized, unable to absorb sufficient nutrients, and losing its magic power, indicating that the sprite worm is about to miscarry. How should I help it condense its magic power? It's not Dosin, who can release magic just by stimulating it. He was stumped by the question. Just then, Costo, who was teaching the night squad swimming lessons, suddenly swam back from the sea and shouted, Sir Lord, I found a sunken ship." He trotted over to List. "A sunken ship. It is the wreckage of a sunken ship not far ahead. Half of it is buried in sand." "A sunken ship?" List retracted his train of thought and quickly responded, "Captain Costo, salvage it. I need help. I will have Gort support you. How long will it take for you to salvage it?" "Please rest assured, the sea at the sunken ship's location is not deep. When the tide is low, it will only be about 5 meters deep. At that time, I can dive into the water and tie up the sunken ship, while the people on the shore could directly pull it out of the mud. When will the tide be low today?" "Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Get ready." The sunken ship treasure trove had entered a countdown. List felt relieved. Unable to salvage it for the time being, List once again returned to the Thorns worm stalk thicket. He was looking for the poisonous, mutated, fast-growing thorns rewarded by the smoke mission. Poisonous mutated, does it mean poisonous thorns? It can be directly called fast-growing poisonous thorns. Still not a magic ingredient. It was a bit disappointing, but List felt that perhaps the reward was far more than that. This seems to be a chain mission about the evolution of Thorns worm. At first, it was a fast-growing thorns reward, but now there are fast-growing poisonous thorns. This thorns bush has become more and more interesting. Returning to the bushes, he did not cast Magic Eye again. In the morning, he used Magic Eye to find a magic ingredient, and now he wanted to find the poisonous thorns. Such a large bush was full of thorns, and there was a feeling of not knowing where to start. He did not know what the fast-growing poisonous thorns looked like. He could only mobilize his retainer knight. Look for unusual thorns. Remember, don't touch them at will. They may be poisonous. The 6th retainer knight took the order and began to search in the bushes. List and his valet, Thomas, were also searching. This search went on for several hours. In total, he searched the bushes 3 times and even asked the servants to send food over. Of course, List did not look for long. In fact, he hid under the shade of a nearby wild fruit tree, enjoyed the ice cream sent by the servants, and watched the others work. Finally, in the afternoon, under the scorching sun, the serfs who were sent to look for unusual thorns found a special thorn. This thorn was mixed in the bushes. It was not a normal cyan stem with small thorns, but a stem with purple stripes. The purple stripes added a touch of mystery to it. Moreover, every small thorn grew on top of the purple stripes and was also purple. Is this a fast-growing poisonous thorns? List decided to give it a try. He asked someone to bring a rabbit raised in the castle, and then used the small thorns on the purple stripes to cut the rabbit. The small thorns broke in an instant, and purple juice gushed out, mixing with the rabbit's wound. After a moment, the rabbit twitched and fell to the ground dead. TSK. Sir, this thorn is highly poisonous. The rabbit didn't even last a quarter of an hour. If it had been a human, I'm afraid they wouldn't have survived after being cut by such thorns. Blair, who had been in charge of recording the growth of the thorns worm's worm stalk, clicked his tongue in amazement. List was satisfied with the experiment. Reward this serf with 10 silver coins. The serf thanked him profusely and left. The other serfs also thanked him and left. Although they didn't receive a reward, each of them received a copper coin as payment. They earned a copper coin for less than 2 hours of easy work. Well, lucky job. Looking at the fast-growing poisonous thorns, List already thought of how to use them. Blair, I have a new task for you. Please instruct me. Vigorously cultivate a batch of fast-growing poisonous thorns. In the future, I will plant fast-growing poisonous thorns on both sides of the road in the Thorns Ridge. My castle also needs to be decorated with deterrent green fences. Chapter 109. The East Coast. The tide receded, leaving a large number of seashells, starfish, crabs, and other seafood on the beach soaked in seawater. Fishermen had already begun to fish out the seafood. List rode on Black Dragon. He watched a large group of barefoot people bustling about on the beach. They were busy connecting ropes, finding practically all the ropes in the town and twisting them into one. Costo dived to the location of the sunken ship and tied the rope to the keel of the sunken ship. He swam back and beckoned to the crowd. Pull. We can pull. Dozens of serfs, like trackers on a Volga river, took heavy steps and instantly tightened the ropes. Under Gort's command, they shouted slogans and exerted their strength. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The slogans came one after another. The ropes tightened around their shoulders, relaxing and tightening in accordance with the rhythm of their bodies. Step by step, they sunk their feet deep into the yellow sand. Some of them were old men in their 50s, some were young teenagers doing the same work. Their clothes were tattered, their faces were dark, their hair was stuck to their foreheads, and sweat was dripping down. They really looked like the trackers on the Volga River, but they were not. List had seen Repin's famous painting trackers on the Volga River. It was in the language textbook. In the painting, the trackers towed boats by the river all year round. Life had ravaged them to the point of numbness. The Flower Town's temporary trackers, on the other hand, had smiles on their faces even though the sun was blazing above their heads. That was because each person could earn a copper coin for this trip as a hauler. The Sir Lord who came from the great Tulip Castle was generous and benevolent, bringing them plenty of food and jingling copper coins, and even silver and gold coins. Life had never been so full of hope. 1, 2, 3. Harder. Gort yelled from the side. You lazy guys, haven't you eaten? On the surface of the sea, Costo kept diving and surfacing, shouting, More strength. The hull has been pulled out. More strength. The bow will be pulled out. He shouted a few times. Costo shouted again. It's a success. The sunken ship has been successfully pulled out of the mud and sand. After they pulled it out, the trackers became even more relaxed. They easily dragged the wrecked ship to the beach. The sunken ship, covered in green algae, could no longer be seen. There was only one mast left, and it was broken. The hull was full of holes, and from time to time, crabs would crawl out. Sir, the sunken ship has been salvaged, Gort said excitedly. Costo also came over and said, It's an old brig. Judging from its shape, it should be a ship from 100 years ago. Sir Lord, this should be a ship of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. 100 years ago, only the Grand Duchy could build a brig. List rode on his horse and circled around the sunken ship. A sunken ship from 100 years ago? Then, it's a merchant ship or a warship? It should be a merchant ship. The cabin is sealed and used to transport goods. Then what are we waiting for? Teacher Gort, get someone to dismantle this 100-year-old cargo ship. I want to see what's left in its hold. As you wish. Building a ship was difficult, but dismantling it was quick. After a while, the cabin was smashed open. Some patrolmen went in and pulled out some cloth that had been soaked in seawater, as well as some grain remains. This was probably a merchant ship that transported cloth and grain, and it had sunk for some unknown reason. Could it be that this is all there is to the treasure of the sunken ship? List expressed his disbelief. As expected, one of the patrolmen suddenly shouted, There are chests. There are a few chests here. They are intact, and the locks have not been opened. Quickly move the chests out. Give me a hammer. The chests are stuck in the bones of the ship. I have to hammer the wood. After tossing and turning, a total of 5 large chests were dragged out of the cabin of the sunken ship and placed on the beach. Costo looked at the chests a few times and came to a conclusion. Sir Lord, this should be redwood. It is strong and durable and has obviously been waterproof. There must be something valuable in the chests. List revealed a smile. In that case, move them to my castle. That's right. Everyone who participated in the salvage this time will be paid double. Captain Costo found the sunken ship, so he will be rewarded with a gold coin. He had not yet seen what was in the chests. He immediately began to distribute the rewards. The purpose was to encourage his subjects to discover, explore, and contribute more good things to him. At the same time, this gold coin was also to encourage Costo to recruit apprentice sailors. He wanted to see if he could really raise a group of qualified sailors. 5 large chests, each as big as a desk, were neatly placed in the hall of the castle. The locks were probably made of brass and had already rusted. Carter guarded the chests and forbade the servants from approaching. Therefore, the maids and serving men could only crowd at the entrance of the hall, curiously sizing up the chests. "Debbie, what do you think is inside? Could there be mermaids? Maybe singing demons? There are singing demons in the sea. The chests are quite old. Even if there were mermaids and singing demons inside, they would have long since become bones." "Not necessarily. I heard that mermaids can live for hundreds of years. I guess it's full of gold coins, no, dragon coins. A chest full of dragon coins can buy the entire flower town. Jim, think about it. Even if the entire flower town, including you and I, were sold, we would not be able to sell a few dragon coins. A chest full of dragon coins can buy the entire Coral Island." Carter turned around and berated the chattering servants. "Have you forgotten the etiquette of aristocracy? Do your jobs well, and don't pay attention to matters that have nothing to do with you, understand?" Mrs. Morrison also came downstairs. She swept the maids with a glance and fixed her gaze on Maggie. "Master studies hygiene is not up to standard. There are even debris in the corners. Maggie, this is your dereliction of duty. You need to clean it again." "Yes, Mrs. Morrison." Maggie nodded in agreement and hurriedly went to get the cleaning tools. Under the rebuke of the two stewards, the servants did not dare to act rashly and return to their posts. Only Carter and Morrison were left in the hall. "Master hasn't returned yet?" "Master went to the Black Nightshade field. The Black Nightshade in the field is not very good. Master is trying to find a solution." "I want to see the Black Nightshade. It is indeed not good." "Mr. Carter, do you think it can still come back to life?" "I believe it can." Carter smiled slightly, "because Master will save it. The glory of the night favors the flower town, and even more favors the Master." List did not know that his steward trusted him so much. At this time, he was looking at the Black Nightshade, which was on the verge of death, frowning as he pondered on how to help it condense magic power. The mission said that magic power, as gentle as water, is flowing away. Does it mean that the Black Nightshade needs to be replenished with water-attributed magic power? In the fief, only I and Marcus have attributed chi, but they are of the fire and wind attributes respectively. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck. He thought of the black pearls. He had 14 water-attributed black pearls in the gem space. Perhaps I can grind the black pearls and sprinkle them on the Black Nightshade's roots so that it can absorb water-attributed magic power by itself. I don't know if this is the right idea, but at present, this is the only way. Making a desperate attempt, he immediately took out a fist-sized black pearl, grinded it, and buried it in the Black Nightshade's roots. Chapter 110. The box was heavy and light. The lock was strong. But this did not stop List from breaking the lock on the lightest box with just a sword imbued with chi. The lock was unlocked, and the box was opened. There was no one else in the hall. Carter sent them away, and he walked out himself. There might be valuable treasures in the box, but as a servant, he should not care. List was very satisfied with Carter's action. Although he believed that Carter was loyal, he could not believe that all the servants were loyal. If they saw a great treasure and told others, it would be troublesome. Don't show your wealth. This principle must be understood. This box is very light, different from the other boxes. What could it contain? Or is there nothing inside? List reached out and slowly lifted the lid. Suddenly, the bright light almost blinded his eyes. The box was filled with strong, reflective, white metal ores. One by one, the light from the window was reflected everywhere. He blinked his eyes. After adapting to the scattered light, he carefully looked at the white metal ores in the box. He took out an ore and weighed it in his hand. It was almost light, but the texture was definitely metal. It was cold and very hard. He had never seen such a light metal before. To his knowledge, metals were generally very heavy. Of course, he also knew that there was a very light metal, lithium, which was twice as light as water and could float on water. But even lithium was heavier than the metal ore in his hand. Now he felt that he was not holding a piece of metal ore, but a piece of foam. He squeezed hard, but the metal did not move at all. When he slashed with his sword, he could not cut it. He could only leave a slight mark. It is not foam, nor is it plastic. He looked at the ore in his hand and recalled the night novels he had read. He raised his eyebrows and gradually smiled. I have probably guessed what kind of metal this is. It is as light as a feather and as hard as iron. It is the magic metal, mithril. In this world, the metals were also gold, silver, copper, iron, and aluminum. However, there were also a few special metals that were compatible with magic and were very good magic conductors. They were also essential materials for creating magic equipment. Currently, there were 3 known types of magic metals: mithril, adamantine, and orichalcum. Mithril was light as a feather, adamantine was indestructible, and orichalcum was indestructible. These 3 magical metals also originated from dragons. It was said that there was a mithril dragon in the unsetting Radiance Empire. In the night novels, the Silver Orders of Chivalry often appeared and followed the protagonist into battle. The standard equipment for the members of the Silver Order of Chivalry was a set of shiny mithril magic armor, and they came and went like the wind. Mithril is very valuable, even more valuable than gold. This chest of mithril is worth at least 1 dragon coin. Liszt licked his lips in disappointment. The reputation of the treasure was well-deserved. He quickly used the space gem to store all the mithril ore, leaving only an empty box. Just this box of mithril ore alone could be said to be a bountiful harvest. However, he had no intention of selling it. He would keep it and use it to forge equipment when he needed it in the future. Touching the red blood sword of his waist, he felt that the red blood sword should also contain a small amount of mithril. Its magic conduction ability was better than that of ordinary adamantine weapons. Even if there was no dragon gem embedded, a weapon mixed with mithril would at least be a magic weapon. Now, let's see what's in the second chest. I wonder if there's adamantine or orichalcum. Liszt raised his sword, gently cut off the rusty copper lock, and opened the lid. The stench hit his face. He almost vomited from a stench. Inside, there were many books stacked neatly. It was unknown how long the books had been stored. The stench from the thick bass paper could be said to be suffocating. Liszt held his breath. Liszt looked at the book at the top. The name was handwritten Serpentines, Rudolph's Alchemy Diary. Alchemy Diary? Liszt's eyes flickered slightly. Alchemists were probably a legendary profession. They might be equivalent to chemists or alchemists. Legend has it that they could use magical alchemy methods to refine ordinary stones into gold. Whoever mastered the mysteries of alchemy would have wealth comparable to that of a country. In night novels, the frequency of alchemist appearances was also quite high. It was just that in reality, there were many people with the title of alchemist, but they did not show true alchemy. They just swindled food and drink. Liszt, who had studied physics, did not believe in the existence of alchemy. Of course, in this different world with magic power, God knows if there would really be alchemy. For example, now he saw a diary with the title Alchemy. It can't really record alchemy, right? Is this to let me grasp the rhythm of alchemy? Am I going to reach the peak of life so soon? Liszt felt his heart begin to beat faster. The profession of alchemist, compared to the top existences such as Dragon Knight, Dragon Lord, Archmage, and Dragon Slayer, was absolutely not much worse. With money, you could really do whatever you wanted. However, just as he was about to touch the book, the Rudolph's Alchemy Diary, which still looked clear, was instantly broken and then rippled into powder. Liszt's fingers directly passed through the powder and grabbed nothing. In his heart, he did not know whether to say it or not. In just a blink of an eye, the whole box of books turned into powder. With a light touch, it scattered into a pile. No longer any handwriting could be distinguished, nor could the appearance of the book be seen. The wind blew in from the window, directly rolling up the powder and flying together with the stench. After being stunned for a while, Liszt came back to his senses. He clutched his chest and almost vomited blood. My alchemy. The thick parchment book that had been stored for a long time had already decayed. The diary that recorded alchemy also turned into ashes. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. Although he felt that alchemy was unlikely to exist, when a trace of the possibility of alchemy's existence slipped away from his hands, the sense of loss still hit his heart painfully. The box that should have been full of treasures of knowledge had become a pile of waste. He sighed. Reluctantly, he suppressed his uncomfortable mood. Forget it. I was lucky to get it, but if I lose it, it's my fate. Who knows if alchemy is really recorded in the diary? It was an unexpected harvest, and losing it is not enough to shake my mentality. A box of mithril or is already valuable enough. After comforting himself, he carefully lifted his sword and opened the third box. It was also a book. The top was placed with a cover of 5 books. Liszt learned his lesson and did not directly touch them, but carefully remembered the cover of each book. Steel Ridge Kingdom World of Warcraft Guide. Close Contact with Multi-Horn Magic Rhinoceros. Interesting Stories of the Golden Flash Tower. Colorful Mushrooms of the Red Monkey Forest. Fox Manor on a Rainy Night. The covers of these books were not handwritten serpentines, but printed serpentines. Obviously, they were published and sold on the market. Golden Flash Tower? Red Monkey Forest? Fox Manor? He had never heard of these 3 places, but he could conclude that they were all places of the Steel Ridge Kingdom, because only the Steel Ridge Kingdom and its vassal states used serpentines. Including Rudolph, who wrote the Alchemy Diary, they should all be people of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Liszt carefully reached out to touch the book, hoping to open a page. However, he still failed. As soon as the book was touched, it immediately turned into powder, unable to be preserved. Chapter 111. The last 2 boxes did not contain books. To Liszt's surprise, one box contained all kinds of jade, and the other box contained all kinds of crystals. Jade and crystal, the value of these 2 boxes is definitely not lower than the value of mithril ore. He picked up a milky white jade. The regret of the disappearance of the books was somewhat diluted. Jade and crystal could be regarded as types of gems, but the origins of the 2 were completely different. Jade came from the earth, like saltpeter and sulfur, which were naturally produced by the earth. Crystal, on the other hand, came from dragons, which were associated with the production of gems by dragons. Dragons could produce gems, which had extraordinary magic power. But gem mines were rare, and more often crystal mines were associated with gem mines. Topaz was around topaz, and ruby was around ruby. Crystals also contained magic power, but compared to gems, crystal power was less. Aristocrats liked to use crystal-carved drinking cups. In Liszt's castle, there was a set of such crystal goblets used to entertain distinguished guests. Crystals were also commonly used to make magic lamps, which could be lit day and night until the magic power contained in them was exhausted. Every castle with a name had a crystal lamp. Crystals were also excellent accessories for aristocratic ladies. A crystal necklace could add a lot of elegance to a lady. Jade originating from the earth, also called magic jade, was also a stone with magic power. But the magic power contained in it had been highly integrated with the jade itself, making it difficult to develop and use, and unable to make magic items. But jade was the best food for sprites. During the transplanting of worm stalks, sprites had to rely on jade to maintain their lives. When contracting sprite worms, jade was also used as bait, and jade was used to make containers for sprites to live in, which would increase the probability of sprites' evolution. Therefore, the value of jade was not lower than that of crystal. Liszt opened the gem space. After putting a box of jade and a box of crystal inside, Liszt shook the bell and called the butler. "Mr. Carter, I have put away the treasures in the boxes. Most of them have been severely damaged over the years, leaving only a few scraps. Have someone move them away and throw them away." He carefully rummaged through the boxes of books. The books were all rotten, leaving no recognizable writing. This was a drawback of thick bast paper, which could not be stored for too long. Liszt felt that the lack of historical records in this world must have something to do with the thick bast paper. During the manufacturing process, The thick bass paper would undergo an acidification process so that it could be written on smoothly. However, things that were slightly acidic were prone to chemical reactions and were difficult to preserve for too long. That was how he understood it. Although there are some regrets, overall, the treasures from the shipwreck have made me a windfall. Very good, Liszt thought to himself. His mood gradually became better. Therefore, he asked the kitchen to hold a barbecue for the banquet. Gort, Marcus, and the others had also come to participate. They also knew that Liszt had obtained a bountiful harvest today, but they rationally did not ask what the treasures were. For 3 consecutive days, Liszt was paying close attention to Nightshade's condition. The transplanted black nightshade had already adapted to the new soil and environment and was beginning to regain its vitality. The green leaves were full of vigor. Those that should be blooming continued to bloom, and those that should be bearing fruit continued to bear fruit. Only the black nightshade, which gave birth to the sprite worm, remained in a dying state, its magic power intermittently giving the impression that it could die at any time. However, it did not die, and was just persevering. There was no change in the smoke mission, which meant that the mission had not been completed. The Black Pearl's magic power should be sufficient. I can see signs of magic power emanating from under the soil. I can't use any more strength. Black Nightshade, little bug, whether or not you can survive depends on your desire to live. For this smoke mission, he could only wait for Nightshade to die. The mission would fail, or for Nightshade to come back to life, the mission would be completed. Listed up, he looked in the direction of the castle, where Yellow-Gray Horse was galloping towards the castle. Marcus is back. He mounted Black Dragon and returned to the castle, just in time to bump into Marcus, who was standing at the gate. Teacher Marcus, did the trip go smoothly? Everything went smoothly, sir. Tomorrow, the Crystal Craftsman Brad will follow the Flower Caravan's transport team to the Flower Town to serve you for a month. It's been hard on you, Teacher Marcus. Liszt nodded. After obtaining a large number of crystals, he came up with the idea of making a telescope. Glass was the most suitable material for making telescopes, but glass production was relatively complicated. For the time being, Liszt did not have the ability to produce glass, so he could only use crystals to make binoculars. It was very simple to make a pair of telescopes out of transparent white crystal. The Coral City had craftsmen who specialized in making crystal ornaments. These craftsmen might not be able to make crystal lamps, but it was absolutely not a problem for them to polish concave and convex mirrors. Are the 2 lenses of a telescope concave or convex? There was some physics that Liszt had forgotten. He remembered that a monocular consisted of 2 lenses, which could be lengthened and shortened to different distances. By hiring a crystal craftsman for a month, he should be able to make a good pair of telescopes. The Crystal Craftsman Brad. He arrived the next day, as scheduled. He was a bald, middle-aged man with a thick beard. He spoke in a low, muffled voice. Respected Baron of the Flower Town, Brad sends his regards. Brad, do you know why I hired you? Mr. Marcus said that you wanted to make a few crystal products for you. Yes, help me make a batch of mirrors. Liszt handed him a few pieces of white crystal. White crystal was a mineral associated with white gemstones. As for what kind of dragon produced white gemstones, Liszt did not know. There was a lot of information about dragons, but most of it was vague. Those countries with dragons would always hide their dragons mysteriously. Is this white crystal? I can feel the magic power contained in it. Brad was a freelance craftsman, as well as a trainee knight. He had chi. Craftsmen who made gems and crystals must have chi. Liszt shook out a piece of thick bass paper. I need you to make these pieces of white crystal into mirrors. The surface must be very smooth, the thickness must be uniform, and the shape must be circular. There are 2 sizes of mirrors, but the thickness can vary. The structure of convex and concave lenses was drawn on the paper. Liszt could not figure out which focal length of the convex and concave lenses were suitable to be combined into telescopes. He simply had the crystal craftsman make a few more pieces, and when the time came, he could combine them one by one to experiment. As you wish, Sir Baron. Then you will stay in the Flower Town. If you can finish grinding the mirrors ahead of time, you can leave ahead of time. The salary will still be the 1 gold coin promised before. Crystal craftsmen were relatively high-end craftsmen and usually had a good income. It was normal for them to earn 20 to 30 silver coins a month. If List wanted to hire them to work, he had to come up with a higher salary. Chapter 112. The binoculars were still being sharpened. The black nightshade was still half dead. The fragrant coconut sprite worm was still gestating. The fast-growing poisonous thorns of the thorns worm stalk shrubs were still sprouting new seedlings every day. Houses were still being built sporadically in the settlements, as well as in the 4 districts of the small town. The road construction was still ongoing. The castle's Dosen Avenue was still under construction every day. Shooting arrows, practicing spear shooting, man and horse charging as one. List's life was very fulfilling every day. Mrs. Abby's cooking skills had evolved rapidly. Not only could she make pineapple buns, but she had also learned several new cuisines. The Thorns caravan traveled back and forth to the North Valley City every day to purchase supplies needed by the castle. As long as they had gold coins, they could buy anything they wanted. Silently nourish everything. I have been in this world for almost half a year, yet I have not done anything spectacular, nor have I carried out any bold and decisive construction. However, under my guidance, the Flower Town is still on the path of rapid development. The territory may still be barren, but at least it has a new look. Previously, he only had 2 assistants, Gort and Marcus. Now, Gort was the administrative officer, Marcus was the temporary knight captain, Isaiah was the financial officer, Blair was the legal officer, and Carl Hammerstein was the defense officer. Old Grandette was the captain of the flower caravan. Harpagon was the vice captain, Sherlock was the captain of the Thorns caravan, and Costo was the captain of the flower. He had already formed a team. The sprite worms had grown from 4, tulip sprite worm, corn sprite worm, alfalfa sprite worm, and thorn sprite worm, to 7 sprite worms. There were also the tomato sprite worm, wheat sprite worm, and peanut sprite worm. There were still 2 sprite worms waiting to give birth, fragrant coconut sprite worm and black nightshade sprite worm. The number of horses in the small town, including the horses of the new officials and their families, had grown from 15 to 7 pregnant mares. 2 more foals and 8 older horses had been bought. There were also 12 carriages allocated to the caravan. There was not enough pasture in the horse farm, so fodder had to be purchased from outside. In addition, potions, smoked grass, fruit-stealing monkeys, seafood. Only the population growth was slow. From 1991 to the present 2074, there was only an increase of 83 people. However, at the end of September, 500 serfs would be transported over to replenish the labor force. Actually, the biggest gains are all on me. List leaned back in his chair and leisurely sipped on a cup of milk tea without any additives. Behind him was a fruit tree outside the castle. It was a green apple tree that produced very little fruit and tasted sour. At least it could shed some shade. He was in a good mood. Perhaps Mrs. Morrison's skills had improved, or perhaps the quality of the milk produced by the pregnant cows had improved. Either way, the milk tea was getting better and better. Even after drinking the milk tea, he could feel that the nutrition in the milk tea made his body feel especially comfortable, and even his spirit became excited. It swept away the laziness of the hot summer. Dosen is my good bodyguard. His rock thorns are very powerful, so blessed curls can probably be saved for meat. Space gems are the most priceless treasures. Mithril, ores, jades, crystals, and black pearl should be valued in dragon coins. The red blood sword is a gem weapon, and there's also the sun's child floating bottle. His personal wealth, if measured, might already be second to none in Coral Island. I also learned the Chi's secret skill, Magic Eye. Although I don't know why Vulture Knight Stephen hid magic eyes in a book, but I should thank him. This auxiliary Chi's secret skill is far better than any powerful Chi's secret skill. Dosen was running around in joy. Woof woof. Thomas, who was holding the rope behind Dosen, was sweating profusely as he ran. With Dosen's current strength, Thomas, an ordinary person, had no way to hold him back. List moved his gaze away from Dosen. He looked at the small garden next to the castle. A maid was cleaning up the dried meat in the small garden. The black and white maid uniform looked very pleasing to the eye. Is that little Lily? List was a bit far away and could not see the maid's facial expression, but he could judge from her figure. Little Lily, the kitchen maid, was the tallest maid in the castle. She was about 1.7 meters tall. He remembered the first time he saw little Lily. At that time, the 17-year-old girl was still a thin bamboo pole figure. List did not know if it was because of the good food and living in the castle, but now he could see that she had breasts and her buttocks were a bit more perky than before. The girl has grown up. The picture of a busy maid is really pleasing to the eye. After sighing with emotion, he retracted his gaze and began to operate the qi in his body. Just now, there was some restlessness in his body, as if he wanted to express his respect to the maid. His body was also developing rapidly. His height had increased by quite a bit, and he was estimated to be 1.83 meters tall. The Earth Knight Marcus was a standard 1.86 meters tall. Standing next to him, List was not much different. The Count was about 1.81 meters tall. His deceased mother, Melissa, was said to be a tall beauty. Therefore, List inferred that he could probably continue to grow taller. It would not be a problem to surpass Marcus. Perhaps he could eventually reach 1.9 meters? The restlessness was difficult to quell. List simply stood up, pulled out the red blood sword hanging from his waist, and began to practice Fiery Dragon Drill. In a flash, it was September. The Count had returned from the Blue Dragon Island and gathered all his followers to go to Tulip Castle for a meeting. As a baron of the Flower Town, List naturally had to go. The Coral Island system was not huge. There were 2 Viscounts, 16 Baron, 82 Lord Knight, 1 Life Viscount Levis, and several Life Baron. Life Knighthood was a title outside the system. It enjoyed the same treatment as a noble title, but it did not have a territory and was not hereditary. Some countries had it, while others did not. In the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, Life Knighthood was generally granted to the adult heirs of a large family. When they came of age, but their father had not yet died, it was not their turn to inherit the title. Some were even in their 40s and had not yet inherited the title, which was a bit embarrassing. As a result, Life Knighthood came into being. Of course, some wizards, craftsmen with contributions, and even wealthy merchants might be conferred the title of Life Knighthood. The Grand Duke has issued an expansion order. In autumn, he will cooperate with the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom to attack the coast of the Eagle Kingdom. After meeting with List, Levis informed him of the news. Father has decided to accept the expansion order and participate in the war. Are you going as well? Asked List. Of course, I have to go. This is a test for me. I need to prove that I can inherit Father's will and be favored by the glory of the night. Levis was not nervous, only excited. The Grand Duke has arranged for Father to cooperate with Marquis Roderick, while I will act as the liaison officer to coordinate the 2 orders of chivalry. Marquis Roderick? List recalled that Madame Penelope had said that Levis was pursuing the other party's daughter. What is the name of the Marquis's daughter? Chapter 113. The surnames of great nobles were always very elegant. They were both Marquis clans, but the Taro family's surname was Long Taro. Compared to the Golden Wheatear clan surname was Golden Wheatear. There was a difference in grade. This was also a display of their foundation. A few decades ago, the Golden Wheat family surname was still Golden Wheat. This was a very powerful family. The reason why their surname wasn't Barley or Wheat was because their family not only had the Wheat Great Sprite, but also the Barley Great Sprite. Before the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was established, the Golden Wheat family had already relied on grain sales to rise to power. Later, they followed the Sapphire family and established a country, becoming the first Marquis family in the Grand Duchy. But just like the Small Kerchief clan and the Big Kerchief clan, the Golden Wheat clan had also experienced a split several decades ago. The branch that had the Wheat Sprite was conferred the title of Earl due to their military exploits, and they changed their surname to Golden Wheat Grains. The branch that possessed the great barley sprite inherited the title and changed their surname to Golden Barley. Every time, the family name changes. It meant the development of the clan, the improvement of the bloodline, and the change of status. If one day, I can also nurture a great tulip sprite and rely on my military achievements to be conferred the title of Earl, then, according to the habits of the nobles, perhaps the tulip family will change their name to Red Tulip, and I will change my name to Black Tulip. List Black Tulip? Sometimes, List would indulge in idle fantasies. Then, my dear brother, I wish you all the best. After finding out the name of the Marquis daughter, List smiled and gave his blessings. I will succeed. Unlike cousin Meopal, Loria and I have been corresponding for half a year, and I know she has already noticed me. What I need to do now is to beat the other competitors with an excellent performance. Cousin Meopal, it's purely unrequited love. The princess has many guests. As Levis spoke, he did not forget to make fun of Meopal. How should she put it? Her cousin's character, appearance, and family background were all impeccable, but he fell in love with a dissolute princess. List had a good impression of Meopal, so he didn't go along with Levis's teasing. Right, brother, the black pearls I sold you last time, did you forge them in a magic equipment? It's a success. The magician carved a special magic rune on it, and then it became a special item that can silence the wind. Silence the wind. The water magic in the black pearl can suppress the flow of wind, especially wind magic. I saw with my own eyes that the wind blade released by the magician dissipate when it was 5 meters away from the black pearl. Although it is a little big, it can be used to defend against sneak attacks from wind chi. He looked at List and continued, especially for a knight like Marcus who has the wind combat aura. He likes to practice archery the most. He wants to use his combat aura to control his bow and arrows to complete a fatal sneak attack. Now, I don't need to be nervous when I meet an elite among the Wind Chi Earth Knight. It seems that the Black Pearl is very useful. I always feel that I sold it cheaply. 280 gold coins is not a small amount. It can only silence the wind, nothing more. If it could silence all magic, then it would be really valuable. Levis moved closer. Do you still have any black pearls? As far as I know, a pearl oyster can take out several pearls, and a giant clam should be the same. You must have some black pearls in your hands. List didn't answer and asked back. It can silence the wind up to 5 meters? Yes. Such an ability made List's mind become active. He sold Levis a bowl-sized black pearl that could cover an area with a radius of 5 meters and silence all wind. If it was replaced with 2 basketball-sized black pearls, how big of an area could it silence? If it was replaced with a wash-basin-sized black pearl, how big of an area could it silence? I'm afraid it would have a radius of tens to hundreds of meters. Such an ability might only be used on the battlefield to avoid sneak attacks from wind chi. But if it was used on the sea, think about it. If the flower was equipped with a wash-basin-sized black pearl that could silence the wind around the entire ship, it would be equivalent to not suffering from storms at all. Then, sailing on the sea would not be like walking on flat ground. Even if the waves could not be calmed, the wind would still be silenced, and the threat would be greatly reduced. In an instant, he made a decision. The wash-basin-sized and basketball-sized black pearl must not be sold. This is a necessity to arm my own fleet in the future. So he replied in a casual tone, Of course, I still have one. I originally intended to keep it as a collection. Black pearls are not a rare treasure that can be obtained easily. Sell me another one. You want another one? Yes, I intend to make it into a new magic equipment and then give it to Rolia. What do you think? Isn't it very thoughtful and sincere? List said casually. Women usually have no resistance to jewelry. I think it's a good idea. How many gold coins are you going to pay for it? I still have a black pearl of the same size as the one I sold you, as well as a few smaller black pearls. 280 gold coins. This was the price of the previous black pearl, and Levis shouted the same price. Silencing all wind, with such an effect, 280 gold coins can't be bought. List said unhurriedly. Now it was the seller's market. It was time to raise the price. After a long talk, In the end, List sold another black pearl for 430 gold coins. List, your heart is black, just like those merchants. It doesn't matter whether my heart is black or not. What matters is that you can let Rolias see your red heart, isn't it? At the luncheon, the Count made an announcement about the expansion order. Then he began to call for followers to follow him into battle. This was nothing new. Every year or two, an expansion order would be issued. Therefore, in one afternoon, all his followers were called. The Count himself dispatched the most elite Coral Island orders of chivalry, a total of 10 knight squads, a total of 130 people, as well as a temporarily formed garrison orders of chivalry, a total of 15 knight squads, a total of 195 people. His followers dispatched a total of 26 elite or ordinary knight squads, a total of 342 people. Altogether, 667 knight squads were mixed into 4 orders of chivalry. The Count himself led the elite Coral Island orders of chivalry. While Levis served as the liaison officer, he led a mixed orders of chivalry. Viscount Trick Wildgrass led a mixed orders of chivalry, and Viscount Jonas Gravel led the last one. Rest for 3 days. After 3 days, all knight are to gather in Coral City and set out for Golden Island by ship. We will act together with Marquis Roderick's orders of chivalry. The Count, dressed in military attire and holding his sword, spoke in a powerful and resonant voice. All the aristocrats participating in the war, covering their left chests with one hand, they performed a knight salute. Follow, sir. Chapter 114. The Count was very busy. List just took a break to greet him and give his blessings. List then left Tulip Castle and returned to Flower Town. Before leaving, the Count said solemnly, Flower Town is developing very well. I am paying attention to the training of your knight squad. I hope that you and Levis can fight side by side in next year's expedition. I'm also looking forward to it. List responded. In his heart, he could not deny it. In terms of war, it was impossible to fight a war. It was impossible to fight a war in this life. He didn't know how to flatter people. He could only maintain his current lifestyle by farming. However, no one could say for sure what would happen in the future. He would not stay in Flower Town all his life and be a country baron. Riding a dragon was a big goal in life, and owning an island was a small goal. To have an island as a fief, one had to at least be a viscount, which required some effort. On the way back, Black Dragon galloped. He was slightly distracted on horseback. The excitement of the aristocrats at the expedition banquet infected him. The aristocrats might be a group of parasites, but their desire for glory was very pure. He wanted to fight. He wanted to charge. He wanted to stake his life for riches and honor. Am I really not going to the battlefield? If I don't go to the battlefield, how can I promote my title? Was it a rebellion? Without the strength to slay a dragon, rebellion is tantamount to courting death. The Sapphire family's Sapphire Dragon could not be treated as a decoration. That was the world's top power, equivalent to nuclear weapons. It was best not to test it. Going to the battlefield to grab credit is the most effective way to promote. The Lord does not need to take the lead in the charge. Let the knight fight and kill. It can still guarantee my safety. At worst, I will be captured and let others redeem me. It will be a bit shameful, but it is most important to keep my life. Maybe I can take the route of an ordinary aristocratic second son and win over an aristocratic lady. Some aristocrats only had daughters. Their titles would be inherited by their daughters. The Grand Duchy recognized female knights. Such an aristocratic lady was the best marriage partner for an aristocratic second son. Some aristocratic ladies, favored by their parents, would get a fief and become a hereditary aristocrat, such as Lavera. She would also be the best marriage partner for the second son of a noble. It's a pity that in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, there are only a few suitable noble ladies. There are many noble ladies at the level of lord, knight, and baron. Noble ladies at the level of viscount and countess are extremely rare. The archipelago is not very big to begin with. There are only 7 marquises and more than 20 earls. Moreover, There was another very real problem. The aristocratic ladies desire the higher-ranking aristocratic young masters, not ordinary small aristocrats. I'm very handsome. My father is an earl, my grandfather is a marquis, and I myself am a baron. Among the second sons of the nobles, I'm probably an extremely competitive existence. Let me think carefully, those single noble ladies in the Grand Duchy who are suitable for marriage. After thinking for a while, he actually couldn't think of a single one. All the nobles hoped to have a son to inherit their title. There were very, very few nobles who only had one daughter. The battlefield was too dangerous, and there were too few female knights. List thought of a third way to obtain a title, by making a great contribution. If he offered his paper-making technique to the Sapphire Grand Duke, he might be able to obtain the title of Count or even Marquis. However, the titles conferred on the basis of contribution are all life titles without fiefdoms. This method is not advisable at all. After thinking it over, he still couldn't come up with a good solution. He smiled self-deprecatingly and inwardly sighed. Instead of going through so much trouble, it would be better to look forward to the Count and Levis. Hold on. I feel that this idea shouldn't appear. After all, they are blood relatives. After returning to the Flower Town, Liszt once again fell into a leisurely pace of life. The Count was in a hurry to participate in the war. He couldn't even hold his birthday on the Coral Island on September 14th. Therefore, he didn't have to worry about diplomacy and could develop the town with peace of mind. The Black Nightshade was still half dead, but as long as it wasn't dead, it meant that the sprite worm still had the desire to live. There was still hope. What brought him joy was the fragrant coconut tree. The fruit farmer Jiggs came to report that the fragrant coconut had split open. Instead of coconut milk, a milky white, plump sprite worm crawled out. He brought the jade powder and the jade box. Liszt rushed to the oyster settlement, climbed the several tens of meters tall fragrant coconut tree, and saw the long-awaited fragrant coconut tree sprite worm. It was very fat, fatter than all the sprite worms he had on hand. Its body was also particularly white, as if it was faintly glowing. It looked as if it had just taken a milk bath. "Little fellow, come, I'll treat you to some jade powder." He sprinkled the jade powder on the fragrant coconut to lure the sprite worm. The newborn sprite worm, relying on its instincts, was quickly attracted by the magic power contained in the jade powder. It began to swallow the jade powder in large mouthfuls. Next, Liszt simply smeared the jade powder on his finger and extended it to the sprite worm's mouth. He bit down. The contract was completed. The pleasant feeling of telepathy made him and the fragrant coconut tree sprite worm closely linked, sharing joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. After putting the fragrant coconut sprite worm into the jade box, Liszt rewarded each of the fruit farmers who had been patiently looking after the fragrant coconut sprite worm with a silver coin. "Jiggs, you still have to carefully look after the worm stock. Understand?" "Understood, Sir Lord." After returning to the castle, the fragrant coconut sprite worm was handed over to Carter to be stored in the worm house. Carter was very happy, but at the same time, he expressed his concern. "Master, we already have 8 sprite worms. I am afraid that the castle's servants will not be able to meticulously look after every worm stalk. Do you need to hire new servants to specifically look after the worm stalks?" This question reminded Liszt. Of course, no one in the Flower Town dared to disobey him, let alone destroy his worm stalks. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if a commoner went crazy and cut down the worm stalk? Or what if a beast accidentally ate the worm stalk? Don't expect the fence to stop everything. Your concern is very reasonable. However, I do not intend to hire servants to look after the worm stalks. I intend to set up a regular team to look after the worm stalks. He immediately called Gort, Marcus, and Carl Hammerstein. "Sir, Teacher Gort, Teacher Marcus, Carl, I called you here because I have more and more sprite worms. The worm stalks are scattered all over the fief. They need better protection. Sir, do you need more people from the patrol team to frequently patrol the worm stalks? Just patrolling is not enough. I need to focus on protecting them for a long time. Do you have any good ideas?" List had an idea, but he did not reveal it. Holding back and not revealing. This was the way of the superior to control his subordinates. Gort thought for a moment, then said, "At present, the Wormstalks are mainly protected by the castle's serving men, the surveillance of the local farmers, the patrol team, as well as the fence's isolation. Perhaps we can train more patrol team members to specifically patrol the Wormstalks." Marcus was even more straightforward. "We can leave it to the night squad to patrol." Carl finally said, "Sir, I think that we can arrange for patrol team members to specifically keep watch around the Wormstalks. At present, we have 20 patrol team members. We do not need so many to patrol the fief. By dividing 8 patrol team members to keep watch over the Wormstalks can be protected at all times." Carl's proposal is more in line with my idea. However, there is no need for patrol team members to keep watch. That would be a waste of manpower. Select strong serfs from each settlement and arrange for them to guard the Wormstalks in shifts. The fief's administrative office will pay them a copper coin a day. Chapter 115. Rome had been very excited recently. He thought that, like Odin and Gray, he would not be able to cultivate chi and would eventually be abandoned by Mr. Marcus. The consequences of being abandoned and becoming a good-for-nothing without chi were very frightening. He, Carl, Odin, and Gray were all serfs and were hired as Baron List's retainer knight. But now, Carl had become a trainee knight, the Flower Town's defense officer, and had a patrol team of 20 people under his command. When he saw Carl, he had to call him Mr. Carl. The change in his status put great pressure on him. There was a suffocating sense of urgency, as if the giant hand of fate was clutching his throat, trying to strangle his hope of progress. He was afraid that he would really achieve nothing. Therefore, not only did he earnestly practice cultivation when Marcus was teaching, but he also practiced in private, regardless of everything else. Finally, he successfully cultivated chi, low-level chi, and became a trainee knight. His wish was fulfilled, and his hard work reaped the fruits of his hard work. The Sir Lord appointed him as the captain of the patrol team to assist Carl and be responsible for the fief's public security. Although his status was not as good as that of Carl, but Rome was already very satisfied. His talent was not as outstanding as that of Carl, and he cultivated chi many days later than Carl. Therefore, he should be placed under Carl. The patrol team originally had a captain, but the captain was just an ordinary person who was not convinced by Rome's arrival. However, Rome easily taught the other party how to behave with a few punches. Strength. With just low-level chi, I already have strength that ordinary people can only look at in the dust. How powerful will an Earth Knight with mid-level chi be? Before he had obtained chi, he did not have a very intuitive understanding of Knight. He only knew that Knights were very strong, but how strong they were and how marvelous their chi was, he had no way of knowing. Now that he had chi, he finally fully understood the tremendous qualitative change that chi brought to a knight. Earth Knight, I have no hope of obtaining mid-level chi in this lifetime. However, Sir Lord has given me a chance to change my fate, and I, Rum Winesong, will seize it. From today onwards, I will definitely let my son start cultivating Do Chi from a young age. He was not married yet, but there were already many girls in the town who had expressed their love for him. A trainee knight was still very popular. My son will become an Earth Knight like Mr. Marcus. At that time, he would have the hope of climbing up to the nobility. For a better tomorrow, Luomu did his job conscientiously every day and never slacked off in his patrol work. As the patrol leader, he was especially satisfied. However, what Rum did not know was that List had already noticed his conscientiousness. List was not a fan of mundane tasks. It was not his style to worry about the daily lives of the people in the small town. He did not want to be a Han Xin who was good at commanding soldiers, but a Liu Bang who was good at commanding generals. Therefore, he admired subordinates who worked hard. Rum was a subordinate who worked hard. Rum, based on your performance, I have a new mission for you. Sir, please instruct me. You and Carl have both become trainee knight and can take charge on your own. Therefore, I intend to set up the position of insect officer in the flower town and set up an insect protection team. The team members will be drawn from the strong labor force of the various settlements. As for you, you will serve as the insect officer. What you need to do is to lead the insect protection team and protect the worm stalks. After thinking about it, Liz decided to set up a separate insect protection team. The basic model of this team was roughly equivalent to a militia organization and could be regarded as a supplement to the patrol team. In the future, more and more people would pour into the flower town. The patrol team alone would not be able to maintain law and order. The insect protection team was part of the security force. Patrol team, police station. Insect protection team, militia battalion. Night team, army. It was roughly this line of thought. As the successor of the doctrine of bringing, List's thoughts would always be set up in this way. Ram immediately knelt on one knee and performed a night salute. Ram is willing to follow in Sir's footsteps for life. His body trembled slightly. This was caused by excitement. He never thought that opportunities to change his fate would come one after another. Now, he had officially entered the ranks of officials. Officials were not a class in the formal sense. However, to be able to serve as an official meant that one had already entered the ranks of aristocratic reserve service. When he left the castle, he was still in a bit of a trance, his body seemingly floating. Serving Sir is a moment in my life when I, Rum, am deeply favored by the glory of a knight. Perhaps it was because he felt Liz's sincere concern for the sprite worm. Less than 2 days after the establishment of the insect protection team, he saw that the leaves of the black nightshade worm stalk in the black nightshade field had regained a trace of vitality. The originally covered black spots had also dissipated quite a bit. So you made it? Liz hurriedly summoned the long-awaited smoke mission. Unsurprisingly, the smoke serpentines had already changed. Mission completed. Reward: a black nightshade sprite worm. Sure enough, the black nightshade breeds a sprite worm. This is my 9th sprite worm. Very good. Although I don't know what the black nightshade is used for. The black nightshade berries could be eaten, but only as a snack. Even with the black nightshade worm, it could not bear many berries. It was better than nothing. At least, it was a sprite worm. The smoke distorted and issued a new mission. The late heavy rain is about to visit the flower town. Most of the fief's residents' houses have been in disrepair for many years and cannot withstand the scouring of the heavy rain. As the Lord, how can you sit idly by and do nothing? Please repair the fief's houses. Reward: a variant type of thorns. Another variant type of thorns? List mused, this is already the 3rd mission related to thorns. It seems that it must be a chain mission. The previous invisible dragon chain mission rewarded a space gem. What good things will be rewarded for this time's chain mission? He had a vague guess. A Thorn's Lesser Sprite. Will it be a Thorn's Lesser Sprite? Although he could not guarantee it, List firmly suppressed the idea. He would not be disappointed if he did not hold out hope. Once he really obtained it, it would be a huge surprise. For now, he just had to do his best to complete the mission. Repair the houses. It seems that it is time for another national war. List immediately summoned all the fief's officials and arranged for the repair of the fief's houses. There was almost no rain this summer, which is not common sense. I speculate that there may be a strong rainstorm in the next few days. Most of the houses in the flower town are old wooden houses, which are very unsafe. The new houses are already under construction. As for the serfs, they can be sent to repair their own wooden houses. Gort inevitably looked down on the serfs. Blair was suspected of flattering him. The castle should be repaired the most. The place where Sir lives should be safer and more beautiful. As for the castle's repair work, let's talk about it after the autumn harvest is over and the labor force is idle. Now, each of you will be assigned your tasks. Make sure that every damaged wooden house is properly reinforced. All civilians, whether serfs or freedmen, must accept the work arrangements. After a pause, Liz said, all civilians are not paid. They must work for free to repair their own wooden houses. However, the materials for the repair of the wooden houses will be paid by the castle. This is a benefit I give to my subjects. You're tuning in to the Immortal Ballad YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.